We go to medical school, we learn how to heal people, we learn how to be doctors in terms of what medicines to give, what's the side effects, those kind of things, but we're not taught to be business people, right?
Like a lot of the doctors that I've spoken to, similar to you, when they do start their own practice, they kind of have to be put into a corner to where they almost don't have a choice, where it's like, okay, either I'm going to fall off the deep end and just keep going in this direction, or I'm going to go out and do my own thing.
I really had to take that leap of faith, and once me and him couldn't come to terms, I basically was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. In about 6 weeks, I was able to open my practice, which is almost unheard of.
If you really want to grow and scale and really get the freedom, lifestyle that comes with being a business owner, even as a doctor, you can get that, but you have to focus on what really matters.
Your time is valuable. Put some of that other stuff out to people who can do it.
What happens is if you don't have that plus one like you're talking about, the patients actually are the ones that get affected.
You can have it all, but just not all at the same time.
Ultimately, what happens is down the road when it's overlooked is that physicians are trying to go back and fix something when it's already kind of too late. Welcome to Scale, the podcast where we equip ambitious physicians with the blueprint that they need to build thriving, profitable practices. I'm your host, Anthony Isidro, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the strategies, tactics, and mindsets needed to fuel exponential growth. So get ready to transform your practice, scale your impact, and achieve the success that you deserve. In today's episode, we have Dr. Kathryn Kelly. She's a board-certified internal medicine doctor out of Silver Spring, Maryland. She's the founder of Kelly Collaborative Medicine, a primary care practice in Maryland. She's the founder of KCM Cares, a nonprofit organization, as well as KCM Private Practice Solutions. So we look forward to talking with her and learning about her experience in building her own successful private practice, ways that she grows her practice, how she manages and builds a team, how she markets herself, and how she helps other doctors do the same. So let's dive right in. Welcome, Dr. Kelly, to the podcast. I'm excited to speak to you, and let me just be the first one to congratulate you on the award in recognition to the CBC Power 100 list.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It was fun. I got to go to the recognition party, and it was really nice.
Oh, that's awesome. Is this the first year you were a part of that?
It was. I was fortunate to be nominated by one of my colleagues. I do go to some of the CBC events in other venues. The Phoenix Awards I've been to multiple times and went there last night, which was really engaging and empowering as well. Exciting to be a part of those events and to really feel the energy in the air and the vision that they have for the future. So it was really, really nice to be a part of that and to be recognized for the work that I do. I think that's also empowering because it makes you want to continue to do the things that you're doing. So it's definitely a blessing and a wonderful opportunity.
Yeah, that's awesome. It sounds like it was really inspiring. So that's great. So again, thank you for jumping on today. What I wanted to really cover is kind of your journey as a doctor, but also really focus on your experience and journey starting your own private practice, because I know that's one of the things that you do on the side of outside of your medical practice. You really help to consult other doctors and physicians who are looking to launch their own medical practice. And so if we could go ahead and get started and, kind of tell us a little bit about your journey, twofold. Number one, to becoming a doctor, but then the second side of that is your journey from, once you became a doctor, how did you take that leap to starting your own private medical practice?
Yeah.
And, really what inspired you to take that leap? I'm interested to hear about that.
I won't start at the very beginning, but I will say, I was a teen mom. I had my oldest daughter when I was 15. And so I think a lot of times when you get into those situations, you feel like you can't continue to dream and accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. And I'm very fortunate to have a wonderful mother and a wonderful family and friends that always believed in me and made sure that I had the resources that I needed to move forward. So I came up to Howard University for undergrad, and then took some detours, but went back there for medical school, specialized in internal medicine because I wanted to do primary care, and was fortunate enough to have a National Health Service Corps scholarship during medical school. So after that, I went and worked in an underserved area in Georgia for 2 years before returning to Maryland. And I think that's kind of where the story starts of wanting to start my own practice. I worked for another physician. You go in and you do these interviews and you talk about what your vision is, and they say they can support you in doing those things. And then you get into the situation that's not always um, in line with your goals and your dreams and things like that. And so I found that out after a couple years of working with him. And I just had made a decision that I didn't want to start a private practice. I wanted to kind of take over some of the managerial things in his practice and be a partner. Um, but I also found that, because sometimes I always say this, you won't move unless you're pushed. So I think a lot of times we'll stay in these really toxic relationships because we're scared of what's on the other side. Like starting a private practice sounds really scary and expensive and a lot of work to go into it, which it is. But
Hmm. Hmm.
I really had to take that leap of faith, and I just once me and him couldn't come to terms, um, I basically was like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and in about 6 weeks I was able to open my practice, which is almost
Wow.
unheard of. Like that's
Yeah.
a very short amount of time from the time that we was like, okay, we're gonna do this. We get in the space. We're gonna
Hmm.
move forward to opening. So I always tell people I feel like God had His hand in every aspect of what I was doing. I tell the story. I was sitting, so me and him had some issues, and so I basically quit on a Thursday. And
Mm.
Friday morning, I was going. My son has autism, and we were going to his meeting, and it just wasn't. Nothing was going in the right direction. I remember just
Mm.
being in tears of like, what have I made the right decision? Like, is this really what I'm supposed to do? And I called my mom, and my mom prayed with me, and she said it's gonna be fine. Keep doing what you're doing. I went and met with someone similar to what you do to start my website.
Mm.
And by the end of that meeting, we had already had a plan for the website. I had a phone number. I had a tentative lease for the building that I'm in now. And everything just from there just kept going in the positive direction. So not that it didn't take hard work, but it definitely took some faith and some prayer and some focus to get to this point. And I think the rest, as they say, is history. And we've been continuing to grow and continuing to do new and different things since then. And that was in June of 2016 is when I had made the decision, and we opened our doors to patients on August 1st of 2016. So.
Wow, that's amazing. Praise God. I mean,
Yeah.
it sounds like God did have his hand on you, kind of opening the doors. And, sometimes that's what it takes to take that leap of faith, and then the
Mhm.
doors will open. So I
Yeah.
think it's a really inspiring story. So thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Um, the other kind of topic I wanted to discuss on that point was, a lot of doctors, they want to start their own practice. Maybe they're in similar situations as you, um, but it's kind of daunting going out and starting your own practice. And it seems to me like a lot of the doctors that I've spoken to, similar to you, when they do start their own practice, they kind of have to be put into a corner to where they almost
Mhm.
don't have a choice, where it's like, okay, either I'm going to fall off the deep end and just keep going in this direction, or I'm going to go out and do my own thing. And it sounds like you were kind of in that same situation. And, one of the other questions I had for you on that component of starting your own practice is, in the early days, I'm sure you faced big challenges. So I'm kind of wondering, what were those big challenges for you in particular?
Mhm.
And, how did you overcome them?
I think for me it was twofold. So one of them was just a knowledge standpoint. Like we go to medical school, we learn how to heal people, we learn how to be doctors in terms of what medicines to give, what's the side effects, those kind of things. But we're not taught to be business people, right? And a lot of times I feel like doctors are encouraged to not advocate for themselves, right? Because our first duty is to do no harm and to do well by the patients. But if you're not whole and healed as a person, like how do you go out and heal others? So I think that
Right.
that's the knowledge we get, but we don't get the knowledge of how to run a business, how to be a boss. Like we learn how to
Mm.
supervise and be over medical students and stuff like that. But being an employer is a whole nother level of
Right.
supervision and of stress. Like I always say, being a doctor is stressful in general. So being employed, I had certain stressors. The stresses are different as a
Mm.
a practice owner. But for me, it's been a better like looking at what those stresses are. I'm able to engage in them and change things better as an owner than I was as an employee. And I think the second big one is financial. Um, and I don't want to make this in the black and white, but as a black business owner or somebody trying to start up, I didn't feel like I had a lot of options, and I didn't feel like people were supportive of the things that I wanted to do
Mm.
financially. Um, Again, like I feel like this was ordained, so I just you got to find a way. And
Right.
so my husband and I took out a loan on our 401k, um, and that was our startup money to start our practice. And I think the biggest fall that a lot of practice I'm seeing that are doing this are doing is trying to overbuild for for your area. They're trying to make these really expensive offices from the beginning. And for us, it was like cosmetic cleanup, make it feel homey and nice, make sure our rooms felt clean and stocked. But we didn't need water fixtures or, you know,
Mm,
uh, the textured walls and the coffee bars, and they're beautiful and wonderful. And those who have there's not a place of judgment. But when you do those things, you're putting hundreds of thousands of dollars on something
mm,
that's not going to give you that much back in return. And I
right.
also think, I had to look at it from the standpoint of who did I want to serve, right? I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't a concierge practice. I really believe in taking care of everyone. We accept all insurances, and take care of everyone. So if you do that, you're not going to make $1 million a year, right? Like it's not
Mm,
as lucrative. I think there's a misconception about how much money you can make. So I think you have to look at it when you're looking at your finances as being as frugal as you can and doing the absolute necessities. And then, the other stuff will kind of fall in place. Your biggest expenses up front are going to be the build out and the equipment that you have to get. And then the second one is labor. So making sure that you have that money kind of lined up and that you also recognize that you may not make money for the first year or
mm,
be able to pay yourself for the first couple years. But it's going to continue to go. So you just imagine if you spent $400,000 on a build out, the time that's going to take for you as a solo practitioner to make $400,000 back is, it's going to take you seeing quite a few patients because you really average about $100 a patient. So that's 40,000 patients that you have to see to make the
mm,
money to make that build out back. So it's
right.
not worth it to take these huge loans and those kind of things. So just to be frugal and look at your resources. The other thing I'll say about that, and I'm sorry to be long winded, is that people also need to look at free money. So look for grants, look
Mm,
for things that are going to kind of feed into your vision and what you want to do. I got I think it was a $10,000 grant from Montgomery County. They do it based on your square footage, but for a startup business. So there are resources out there. There are ways to get money that you don't have to pay back. So that's the biggest part of what I think a lot of the business owners are going to have to do moving forward to not make it so scary from a financial standpoint.
right. Yeah, I think that's definitely something overlooked is that the free money that's out there because there's actually quite a
Hmm.
bit, you know. And yeah, and I think you make great points regarding, it sounds like it's really the financial challenge and then the managing a team, and even growing a team.
Hmm.
That's very challenging. And I think that's common for a lot of, and that goes for all industries. I think going from an employee to a business owner or an entrepreneur, it's a completely different ballgame.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, most doctors are not, like you said, not trained or taught in the business side of things. It's either like you go to school to be an MBA or, doctor, or whatever, but you don't really do both. Some people do both. I've met a few,
Yeah.
but it's
Yeah.
few and far between. But at the end of the day, you can get all the degrees you want, but learning by doing, I think most people learn the best that way.
Yeah.
Um, Another question I had for you was around kind of the differences between being an employed physician and then running your own practice. What do you see as like the biggest differences in that component of maybe on the career standpoint of like just being an employee, pros and cons, and then running your own practice, pros and cons?
I guess from one standpoint, and I actually thought about this before I got on here, so to be almost at a blank. But you run through the different scenarios and things that you would do as a practice owner versus an employee. And I think the biggest pro as an employee is the lack of risk, right? So you're
Mm,
not taking on any of the risk associated with the things that you're doing. So if you don't turn in a note on time, if you don't turn in something to the government on time, if you overspend on something, like you're not the person taking the risk for it, so it doesn't fit. You don't worry, right? You just do what you got to do. You go through the process. So the risk part is a big bonus of being employed. Um, I think sometimes people think the big bonus is that your salary is confirmed. You have a salary that you're going to make and that kind of thing. But
right.
I actually had the situation where I was working for another small practice, and before the end of my year of my contract, they was like, "Well, we can't afford to pay you, so you're gonna have to go to be an independent contractor." And so,
Mm,
that uncertainty is still there, and especially in the current climate. And this is no disrespect to any of the physician assistants and nurse practitioners and things like that, but there is a push from the kind of the corporate side to save money, and so they
hmm.
they make it out to they can't afford doctors. So a
Right.
lot of doctors are getting pushed out and pushed into those different scenarios, like you said, to be up against the wall where they have to make some different decisions. So I would say that's the kind of the other, both sides of that same coin, is that yes, you don't have the risk, but there's also these other risks that are involved, where there's not as much job security as you might think, in that path. You also, I think the biggest con for me was that I didn't get to direct the vision of the company. I
Mm,
couldn't create the field that I wanted to. of the organization. So like
Yeah.
a big part of what's important to me here is that when people come in, they feel welcome, that they feel heard. And it's not easy to, that doesn't take a lot of money to do, right? It just takes an
Hmm.
atmosphere and a brand and a training of your staff and of yourself of how you're going to do your workflow. How are you going to get patients to come into the door? And what is it going to look like when they come in? So my like waiting area, it's everything from Amazon and Home Goods, right? Like, so I went out and got all these things, but I created this feel that you're in my living room, like you're
Mm,
in
that's
a
great.
welcoming space.
Yeah.
And when I first went to work for him, it was very masculine. It was very, and not
Mm.
that there's anything wrong with being masculine, but it was very like dark. And
Mm,
he wasn't as worried about like the little details that make people feel good in a space, like the aromas and having water in the front of the office and that kind of thing. And so you don't get to, and if you work for a corporation, they don't take those things into consideration all the time either. So you don't get to have a say in all of those things. So I think the autonomy um, is a negative on the employed side, but it's a definitely a pro on being your own boss side. I also think I also get a chance as an employer to give people opportunities. So, like a
mm,
big part of
mm-hmm,
what's been important to me is the work that I do with the homeless. So, my practice was coming along fine, and I felt like a door closed in a personal part of my life. And then I found this RFP that was looking for primary care in the homeless shelters in Montgomery County and street
mm,
outreach. And we went out for the contract and we won the contract. Like I said, we just
mm,
a small practice here in the area, but I also took my vision of making people feel welcome, of giving quality care and equity and access into that contract, and we were able to get that contract. So that diversified my platform of what I do in my
mm,
practice. So yes, I
mm-hmm,
see patients. I have other people that other providers that see patients, but we also then expanded and created some balance so that everything in my practice is not about me seeing patients. Part of my practice is doing those things, and also really getting into the community service part that means a lot to me, because I think that's how people get burnt out as an employee. You don't
yeah,
always get to pull in these things that make you happy.
right.
I sit and laugh with my patients, and they're my therapy. I get something out of that situation that I couldn't get necessarily as an employed physician. So like I said, pulling those opportunities in, and those opportunities lead to other opportunities that led to us running the homeless medical respite here in the county, which is
Mm,
kind of like a step down from the hospital. So people who are unhoused, who
mm,
require a higher level of medical care, but not
mm-hmm,
being in a hospital or in a nursing home, we're able to provide that for them in these facilities that we have in downtown Rockville. So that goes around the question a little bit, but
yeah.
definitely pros and cons to both sides of it. But I think back and I won't ever go back to being employed. Like I may
Right.
I may work in different areas and do different things, but I get so much out of being able to see my patients the way I want to every single day and giving them a feel that I'm thinking is not necessarily unparalleled, but it's uncommon in the current
Mm-hmm.
medical environment.
Right, right. I think it just comes down to, ultimately being fulfilled, but then having a little bit more say and, impact on the experience that patients are having. That's one of the huge benefits
Yeah.
with private practice, and that is a common thing that I hear a lot is a lot of the doctors who do start their own private practice, they did it because they weren't necessarily happy with their overall experience with whoever they were working for because either they couldn't
Hmm.
control things, not in like a bad way control, but in a good way. Like we want to make things better, but these people just
Yeah.
don't seem to care too much about the patient. They're just like stuck in their ways and satisfied. And that usually happens, I think, for doctors that, maybe older in age, 60 plus, and they're kind of nearing the end. They just don't care anymore. I've seen that a few times. And the younger doctors that are coming in, they're ambitious. They want to actually care for the patients, and I see that
Yeah.
for you as well. Like you really have an empathetic approach to your patient care, and it shows. You know what I mean? Like just the fact that
Yeah.
how you focus on launching your private practice, and you care about every little detail from the even the waiting room and that kind of overall patient experience. It's fantastic. So
Yeah.
that's awesome.
And I
One of
think,
the
I don't want to sound ageist because I don't think it actually has anything to do with how old the doctor is. I think, well, from the standpoint of it, that they don't care, but I think it's that they just don't understand some of the technology, right? So a lot of what we're doing as we move forward is how do we attract the younger and younger patients, like as we move through these generations. you have to be open to kind of understanding the patient experience, right? Because back in the day, it didn't matter, right? You went to your doctor, you got what you needed, you go out. There, people are coming in looking for a different type of experience, and you have to grow as those different aspects change. So, 10 years ago, a podcast would not be the way that we would communicate with patients, right? Instagram would not be it.
Hmm.
Facebook would not be the way that we did
Hmm.
business. And I also think that what some of the older doctors, and at least this was my experience with the person I was with, he was like, well, I've been doing this for 10 years longer than you, so I know what I'm talking about. The thing that he misses in that, yes, you have been practicing medicine for 10 years longer than me, but you haven't had the same life experiences as me,
Mm,
right?
right,
Like,
right.
you got to take into consideration the other leadership roles that I've held. I've been president of a national organization. Like, I've done different things, sat on boards, and taking experiences, and just in general caring for my mom or having an autistic son. Like, all of those things play
Mm,
into who
yeah.
I am as a person. So some of my perspective is that it's gonna be my moms out there that are working long hours and have autistic kids, and are trying to come in on a Saturday to be seen because they can't during the week. So having extended hours, we work late
Right.
on Tuesdays to allow people to come after work. We use the patient portal, which is now a mandate, but we use those
Mm,
technology pieces that people are accustomed to kind of integrate with them a little bit better. And this is the last thing I'm gonna say about that. But I'm an anthropologist by training. I did a double major in biology and
mm,
anthropology, and a big part of medical anthropology is meeting the patient where they are. Is about understanding their culture and bringing that in. And we see that kind of as cultural competency now. That's kind of what the buzzword is about it now. But a big part of that medical anthropology is listening to the patient and finding out how do they accept care, how do they see
mm,
uh, doctoring and healing. Because a lot of patients will come in and be like, God's gonna heal me. I don't want your
mm,
medicine. I don't want this. I'm gonna pray about it, and it's gonna be different. And part of my response to that is that I believe in God too, and I think He gave me the knowledge, and He gave us the technology to help you. Let me be your boat.
mm,
Let me
right.
help you get to the other side of this with the things that I've learned and know. So, and that comes from trying to be culturally competent, or really working in my anthropology background, and bringing that into the patient experience.
What would you say when you think about running your own private medical practice? It's not for everybody, and some people don't really think about that. What would you say are the maybe the few core essential skills that a physician needs to have to successfully make that transition to from employee to running their own business, essentially?
I think the biggest one is how to be a boss, like how
Mm,
to be an employee, I'm sorry, an employer, how
right.
to supervise other people. I think the hardest thing I've had to do is fire somebody, right? Because in my healing doctor heart, right, I can try to
Yeah.
fix it. In my nurturing, like, I'm a change the world mentality, I can make them better, right? But sometimes
Mm,
you also have to it has to be a business decision. And so
hmm.
learning how to be firm but fair, learning how to walk into a room and demand that respect, because everybody thinks I'm 26. Like, walking into that room and being like, okay, we're going to make this happen, and having them respect you on that same level. That's, I think, the hardest part. So you have to have that ability to separate the business from the personal in terms of how you feel about the people that work for you. You have to be empathetic. Yes, you give them opportunities, but you be firm and fair about it. If you're supposed to be here at
Mm,
7:30 and every day you're here at 7:45, then we need to have a discussion. Then maybe we need to move your schedule to make it so the expectation can meet what you actually can do, versus us just letting you go, right? But we
right.
still have to run a business. We still need somebody here to do the job and to do 100%. So, and also, I think you have to be a cheerleader for
Mm,
yourself and for your employees. Um, and the last thing I would say, you have to find that balance, right? You have to figure out how to say no. It comes in different forms. So part of what we have to do initially is saying no to thinking that we can do everything. We are not an expert at
mm,
everything, and
hmm.
that's something I really tell people from the very beginning of when you open your practice. Your time is valuable. Like, you as your healer, doctor time is very valuable. So if you're using that time to answer phones, to book appointments, to send out your billing, to try to do bookkeeping stuff, you're wasting valuable time. It may take you an hour to do
Hmm.
a bookkeeping function. you could, let's say you even were paying them $100 an hour. If you see 4 patients in an hour, even if it's quick stuff, you're going to make $400. So why would
Right.
you, be
Yeah.
inefficient in that? Your time is valuable. Put
Hmm.
some of that other stuff out to people who can do it. It's the same thing with marketing and making a website. Like, I'm not a website expert. I go and hire a website expert.
Hmm.
And yes, it seems like I'm going to pay them a lot of money, but you're saving yourself so much time and effort, and it's done
Yeah.
right the first time.
Right.
And they have a perspective that they can pull into it to help you to get there. So I think, you got to get out your own way sometimes. You can't do everything yourself. You have to use your time wisely. And on the other side, and on the personal side of saying no, is that work life balance, right? Of And especially once you get to be successful and you get pushing through and doing those kind of things, more patients are going to want to see you. They're going to ask for hours later. They're going to ask you to come earlier. They're going to want your time after work. You have to put those boundaries in place and be, again, firm and fair. Like, I have an answering service. We have rules in place. You can't get a form back from me the same day. It's not that's an unreasonable expectation. I
Right.
can't call
Hmm.
every single patient back every single day.
Yeah.
um, and I think that what that transforms into is really from the beginning, figuring out who you want to serve and what you want your life balance to be. Because as a primary care that takes all insurances is a lot different than if I'm a concierge physician. So
Mm-hmm.
concierge physicians really limit the amount of patients that they have in their practice
Yeah.
so that they can see them a little more often, but also so that you're not, staying late and adding extra slots and those kind of things. You really create a
Right.
different environment.
Hmm.
For me, that's not what I was interested in. That's not what I want to do. It's still not what I'm interested in and what I want to do, because I still ethically and morally want to create a space where my patients can have adequate access and quality care no matter what their background is. Whether you speak Spanish and you're from El Salvador or you're a lawyer in DC, like, it shouldn't matter. If you come into the room, you should feel heard and you should feel seen in that space. And you can't necessarily create that in a concierge environment because people have to have a financial stake to be able to pay you what the fee is, to come in to see you, versus my Medicaid patients can't do that. And we see that as we go through these different ups and downs of, and 2009, when we had the crash, being in rural Georgia from 2011, 2013, when we really were in the middle of the transition into the Affordable Care Act and like the expansion of Medicaid, which they didn't do, right? And working in a community health center, you see that. You see the limitations, you see the inadequacies and like the inequities of that environment. And I was really blessed to be working for, I told them they was doing God's work. Like, Albany area primary health care, y'all are the best. Y'all a big shout out. We went into the communities, we had rural clinics, like we worked in the nursing homes, we went to the hospital. It was a very much
Wow.
little bit more traditional internal medicine practice where I worked in the nursing home. I went to the hospital and saw my patients, and I saw them in the clinic. And then to come back to Maryland in 2013, after the Affordable Care Act was implemented, and have patients come in and be like, I haven't been able to see a doctor in 10 years because I didn't have access. But the expansion of Medicare worked to really give them some access that wasn't there before. And we're
Mm-hmm.
still pushing now because what's happening is the insurance companies are trying to get around how they pay people, and then Medicaid is not paying very well for specialists. So yes, the patient can have Medicaid, but they can't find a primary care. And then
Mm.
us as primary cares don't have access to other providers that accept Medicaid to send them for higher level of care. Um, so it kind of is, from a structural standpoint, creating these different uh, avenues for patients. So I'm always going to be an advocate for people to go into primary care and take insurance. But my goal through what I do as a consultant is to help you reach that dream. Because, like you said earlier, you have to be vested. You have to do something that you care about. And if what you care about is making money and having a quality of life for your family, there's nothing wrong with that. But that means you just have to structure what you're doing a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Right. Can you share any specific examples how you've seen maybe doctors or colleagues really transform their lives from starting their own practice?
Yeah. I think a big part of it is just the level of stress.
Mm.
Like, they go from like really feeling unappreciated and being in a space where they don't have a say. And the transformative part is really in them reaching that goal and that dream, right? It's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily that they're not able to go where they want to go, or they're not able to do, on a very superficial level what they want to do, but it's more transformative of them reaching that kind of epitome of like what they've dreamed of doing their whole lives. Um, and I have a client I'm working with right now. He was already in practice, but he wanted to go from concierge to doing the work that he really felt like he was meant to do, which is taking the insurances and seeing more patients in the diverse group of patients. So I think that for him was transformative. And I think some of it is like what I've seen in his transition is him depending on himself for to make his practice grow, right? Because we go in and we're
Mm,
like, okay, we're not gonna make any money. We have to work these three jobs to get to that point. And what I found is when I really stopped and had some focus and just focused here and put my eggs in this basket and put my focus and like my belief in myself here, my practice expanded
mm,
boundlessly. Like I feel like I
right.
still have room to expand more. But I think sometimes we close ourselves off in this box of, I gotta get to this point in this very particular amount of time, and you put too much of your attention in different spaces. So transformatively for me, it was really about removing that cloud of doubt of being like, okay, feeling the imposter syndrome, all of the things that you feel like, can I really do this? And really stepping into this is what my dream is, and I can do this because I'm already doing it, and really just being myself in my space.
Yeah, I think I could definitely see how maybe the dependency changes when you make that transition, where you're no longer depending on other people to kind of, provide everything for you. You got to go do it all yourself. And so then
Yeah.
that leads to maybe the focus kind of being all over the place, because then you're focusing on trying to do everything yourself. And then that leads
Hmm.
into more issues ultimately, because then you got to learn the hard way. Oh, I need to build a team to do this. I can't be
Hmm.
answering phones and doing all this stuff and seeing the patients. So then it's like the next level of learning, or going to the next level in your and running your private practice, is figuring out that you do need to focus on a
Hmm.
couple key areas and then outsource or delegate the rest of it to other people that can focus on that. and
Exactly.
and I've seen a few doctors where they didn't want to do that. And what ends up happening
Hmm.
is it stunts their growth, because
Yeah.
they really want to
Oh,
do
yeah.
everything themselves. They make their own website, they do their own, marketing. And that's what I focus on. So that's what I'm talking about. But that's what I mainly see.
Yeah.
But even in the practice, they got like one staff on the front desk or something. And it's just like, that's fine if that's what you want to do. But if you really want to grow and scale and really get the freedom, lifestyle that comes with being a business owner, even as a doctor, you can get that, but you have to focus on what really matters in order to scale the
Exactly.
business and to grow it. You know what I mean? So
Exactly.
yeah, that's
And one of
awesome.
the things that a good friend of mine told me, I forget what I was going through, but I went to him because he works with McDonald's Corporation, and I was like, how can I keep a good staffing flow? And
Mm,
because I feel like I'm keep losing people. And his recommendation was like,
mm,
you need to be plus one. Like we don't think about it that way. We think about, okay, we got to save money, we got to be doing this,
right.
but part of your budget should be to be plus one because you're gonna have people that
Mm,
call out. You're gonna have different things that happen, and maybe that plus one is in your marketing, and that you have this going out to somebody. What you do for me in my practice, and I don't think we mentioned this, is that you do most of you've been doing my website. I depend on you to put out different like topics every month, and so that's not on me
right.
anymore, right? I get
Right.
to push that out, and that can help me to then grow in other places because I don't have to worry about that. you
Yeah.
know
Mm-hmm.
and so you are my plus one when it comes to that. And my plus one in the office is my office manager for the most part. Like she can do everything, right? So if somebody's out or somebody's doing something, I'm not saying that you could ever work without an office manager, but she's definitely one of my plus ones.
Right.
And I have a personal assistant now, so like my personal assistant is my plus one. I got to
Mm,
take that stuff off of me. It
yeah.
got to be that there's a backup. It has to be that there's somebody that can kind of step into those different roles and make sure that everything keeps happening. Because part of the what we've seen in COVID too, with a lot of physicians having to close, is that they get sick and then there's no
Mm,
backup.
mm-hmm.
They don't have
Yeah.
any uh kind of cushion. And I'm very blessed that like I have other people, other providers that work for me that allows me a little bit of plus one in that way too. Like if I
Mm,
have to go on a trip or I have to be somewhere, like there's still options for patients to be seen in the office. So I think creating that plus one has been, like I said, you can look at it in different ways, but I think that was the one of the best advice I received,
mm.
was to be plus one.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great tactic, really, like have a plus one, because what happens is if you don't have that plus one, like you're talking about, the patients actually are the ones that get affected here because,
Mm-hmm.
so and so on the front desk didn't make it in today. You don't have a replacement for her.
Yep.
Well, the phones are not going to get answered. The appointments are not going to get booked. Ultimately, that's going to decrease your revenue in the long run. And you never know what could happen. So I love that. I think that's awesome.
It speaks to also reaching out again to those people who are professionals, who are experts in that area, to get your advice, right? Like, you're not going to know all the answers, and Google is not the best tool. We say that when people Google their health problems, like, you got to be able to
Oh,
put
yeah.
some things together. So having you as an expert to go to and say, this is what I need, how can I do this, saves me time, money, and stress.
Right. No, totally. And I think that goes for every area of your business. When number one, you can't be the expert in everything, and
Hmm.
even as a doctor, you're super specialized in what you do. And people who
Hmm.
are not a doctor can't just jump in and do what you do because it takes a lot of
Hmm.
years of experience, training, and a lot of practicing going on. And so, as a business owner, and I guess this could go for any business, you can never do everything well. You could probably do one or two
Hmm.
things,
That's true.
pretty well. But outside of that, there's a lot of different hats to wear in running any business. And so you're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to scale or be successful in the long run, I think. And I think it comes down to growth. It's like, what's your vision
Yeah.
and goal for growth? Because you can be a one man band with maybe, a spouse as an employee and then maybe some your kids jumping in there here and there. But, and some people do that and it works for them. But I
Yeah.
think it comes down to growth and your vision and goal for what you actually want for yourself and for your business,
That's
you know.
true.
Um, and I think transitioning over to more operational and financial components, what would your advice be to doctors who they're going to start a practice, let's say, and when it comes time to choosing the right location for the practice, do you think it matters and how much do you think it matters? And, how important is that?
Location is really, really important. And I was gonna say is the most important part. But part of it, you need to do your research. You need
Mm,
to look at, first of all, how many doctors are in the area. Is there really a patient population in the area? Because, like, if you're in the middle of downtown DC, during the evenings, it's nobody there. During the weekends, there's
mm,
really not that much of people in the more industrial parts, or the more, I guess, commercial parts of the city. Or if you're in a rural area, are you located where people can get to you quickly, and in these ideal spaces? So I think location is important. Also seeing what other specialties are there, and what their practice types are. I mean, there's some public information about those kind of things, but also just talking to people in your community. I'm a big advocate for physicians joining their medical societies in their communities and in their state. There's access to other doctors. There's places where you can ask questions and fellowship and find
mm,
out details about what they're actually doing. But for me, when I looked in the location, first of all, I wanted to be close to home. So I'm a
right.
mile from my house, which is so this is
Oh,
my
that's
community
amazing.
that I'm serving. I'm serving the community that I live in. And
Wow.
I'll see some of my patients in the grocery store sometimes, like, hey, it's Dr. Kelly. They don't even know who I am outside of the office. Like, I usually
Right.
have my mask on. They don't know who I am. But that was a big thing for me. I didn't want this long, exacerbated commute. And I also chose a building where they can cater to some of the medical things that I do. There's a lab in this building. There's a pharmacy. There's a imaging um, suite. There is other doctors in subspecialties. So there's ear, nose, and throat. There's a podiatrist. There's OBGYN. The gastroenterologist, where encouraging everybody to get their colonoscopies. I got
Hmm.
mine for 45, right down the hall, like literally across the hall from
Oh,
us.
wow. That's
So
great.
picking a building that had those resources, and
Yeah.
also when you choosing a location and you're looking at what those buildings have to offer, make sure they offer cleaning and those kind of things
Mm,
as well. So that was important for me. I'm also on a busy throughway and close to like the buses and things like that,
mm,
because again, if you're serving people who are Medicaid, some of them may not even have transportation. So being in a good space where they can get transportation, where there's access for disabilities, all of those things are important. So you don't want to be in a walk-up building, because that limits who you can have that comes in to see you, or be up in a building with steps,
right.
and
Good
then people
point.
can't get
Yeah.
to you. So that definitely plays a role in the location, as well as like what the building offers, not just like physically where it is. Um, but I think, also knowing your surroundings and knowing what other people are there. If you're a small primary care practice, it's not necessarily, it's helpful to be in a building where there's a 8, 10, 12 primary care practice place. It's just you're not going to get the flow that you think you want to.
Mm,
But if being in this kind of building where the subspecialists and like that you send to them, they send to you, and it's really close and give you good access, that really works out really well.
Yeah, it's like strong referral partners, and you guys aren't really connected business wise. So I think those are great insights for sure. And what would you say to maybe doctors who aren't really living in a good area to launch a practice? Would you recommend them to either relocate or just commute? How do you think that they should approach that?
Yeah. I think you got to look at your personal setup, right? Like with children, a lot of us want to be in settings where the school system is good, where we can
Right.
have be around friends and family, and that's just
Mm-hmm.
as important because when you go home, you want to have peace.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely wouldn't say necessarily relocate if you don't have to.
Mm.
Usually, you probably could commute within a few miles. I mean, there's a shortage of doctors around the country. I don't know that there is a really bad place to set up shop. I think it may be a bad neighborhood, but a 15-20 minute commute in a different direction could really change things. And if people want to see you, they will come. I have people that come and see me from West Virginia when they have to come for their visits, or from
Wow.
regular Virginia. um, you know, Baltimore area, which is about 45 minutes, an hour away from here. People who come from Eastern Maryland, which is over the Bay Bridge, kind of a little bit further away,
Mm.
and we kind of manage them in the in between time with telemedicine. But they have the understanding that if something you have to be in the office, you have to come here to be seen, and they're willing to do that. And I think that's because we've set a standard and a reputation of really caring for their health.
Right, right. Yeah, you've developed your, kind of overall brand so well from the patient's experience that you can actually get people to travel and commute, and I've worked with doctors where, we were doing marketing for them and we've been able to acquire patients traveling from across the United States, flying in just to see this, maybe a surgical specialist,
Hmm.
right? The reason why is because we kind of, enhance their brand so well just from a digital perspective that patients were finding them, coming across them and thinking like, wow, this is the best person, it's best
Hmm.
specialist, I got to go see them. Right. And when you're talking
Exactly.
about specific things in your health, some things are important, right? You don't want to get it wrong. And so even though there's probably just as good doctors in their area, they still
Hmm.
made a point to like fly out. So I think that is a huge, huge thing right there. And when it comes to location, another thing that I've seen where, especially in Texas, and there's probably other
Hmm.
states where it's like really big and spread out, where a doctor will open up a practice, but they're kind of like so far away from the central point of all the main
Hmm.
population areas. And they're kind of
Yeah.
like way out there, if nobody knows you and you don't have a good, really,
Exactly.
you haven't built a brand, nobody knows who you are, they struggle, and it makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, and building a brand, a positive brand, and building up your reputation takes time, and it doesn't happen overnight.
It
And
does.
if patients don't know you, how are they going to make the judgment on you? They're going to be looking at your website, they're looking at your online
Hmm.
reputation, they're looking at all these other
Exactly.
key indicators that's going to tell them, is this person worth actually traveling 20 minutes, or should I just go right down
Yeah.
the street and see, Dr. Smith or whatever it is. So I think that really gets into building a brand, I would say. And it sounds like that you've really done a great job of kind of building your brand and getting to the point where people are willing to travel and commute, especially after they have that experience with you, which I think says a lot about you and, how you run your practice, which is fantastic, you know?
And I try to treat people like family. Like I think
Mm,
part of it is people are looking for doctors that look like them too. They're looking for doctors that have shared experiences. They're looking for somebody they can trust. And I think that's what
right.
I've tried to build is this trust and this like I said, creating that welcoming environment means like a lot of them probably think I'm their sister, right? Because they come in and I treat them with that kind of respect,
Mm,
um, and not all doctors will do that. And some of it is because going back to some of the questions talked about before, you're on a clock, right? You got
right.
15 minutes. You got to get in and out. You really go in for 5 minutes because you got to spend 10 minutes getting them back and getting the paperwork done and
Mm,
that kind of thing. And I found that I just have to go in and be myself. I've made
mm,
it so that I don't get interrupted because they feel like you're focused on them and you're building that
right.
relationship. So once you have that relationship, people are gonna go see them. I think it's the same. You probably watch TikTok and reels and stuff. There's
Hmm.
barbers and different people who they
Oh, yeah.
built such a big online reputation. People will drive 13 hours, 8 hours just for
Wow.
this one particular person to do their hair or
Yeah.
this one particular person to engage with, and that's because they've, like you said, created this brand and created this wonderful feeling for people that they feel like they're getting what they're paying for, and people will pay for your services.
Right.
And I know this is kind of off topic, but building that brand and that positivity and that online presence is so important, because then you can charge what you need to charge to be happy in your space. Like taking insurances, there's a little bit of a gate on
Hmm.
that, like a
Yeah.
boundary on what you can do, but you can make sure that people know your worth,
Hmm.
that they know that they're going to get what they pay for when they come to see you, and that makes it so that you can really charge for your knowledge and for your experience and for uh that feel when you come into the office, that experience.
Right, right. And I think the patient experience is one of the things that you were talking about earlier that's important to you. And I think it's super important in general just to continue to build a brand, because that's how you build a positive brand. And talking about barbers, 100%, like for example, for me, when I get a haircut, I have options, right? Should I go to a specialized barber? He's going to charge me $50, $60 plus tip. Or do I go down to, these
Supercuts.
yeah, supercuts, great clips. That's where I take my son, and it's like 20, $25, which I still think is too much for a kid. But anyway, I'm not a barber. I don't understand that business. But I've gone there before in the past, and one of the issues that I had was the experience. I never knew what I was
Mhm.
going to get. It's always a different person cutting my hair. I didn't know if they were going to understand what I was telling them in terms of, like, they always act like, oh, okay, got it. What do you want on the sides, back, blah, blah, blah. And they think it sounds like, what they're talking about. But then with the end of the result, I'm like, whoa, that's not what I asked for on the haircut.
Exactly.
Um, and I'm going on a podcast tomorrow, so this ain't gonna work. No, I'm just kidding. But I definitely have learned the hard way that you have to, what you pay for makes a difference in certain areas. And I think for patients, getting that experience and feeling the care from the provider makes a huge difference. They're going to come back to you, and they're going to travel as far as they have to just to get that. Even if it is a little
Exactly.
bit more expensive, even if they got to pay for gas, because it's worth it. It's peace of mind. It's knowing you're going to get what you're going to get. Like when I go to a barber, I know I'm going to pay probably 3 times as much as I would at Great Clips or Super Clips,
Hmm.
but I know the result is going to be top notch. It's going to be the best quality, and at the end of the day, that's what I want. And I think the generation in our society in a lot of different areas have really transitioned into that as their focus, quality over cheapness. Even people who don't seem to have a lot of funds or resources, they still find a way to get it
Yes.
done when it comes down to things
Hmm.
that are really important, and health is the most important thing, right? So
Exactly.
I think that's
Exactly.
that that's awesome. One of the questions I had was around, creating a business plan. What would you say? Because I know you've created a business plan when you started your own practice. We've talked about it before. And I think it's important to point out some of the nuances of creating a business plan, but specifically in your experience, what would you say would be the key components of a business plan
Hmm.
that you just can't overlook?
I would say, and this is what I start with my course that I have, kind of one, to make sure people don't have to make the same mistakes that I made, kind of going through the process and like having sat down and wrote through all of that. The business plan is at the top, but the more important thing for me was creating a mission and a vision.
Mm,
You got to have something to be able to focus you, right? So if you go into, you just writing this business plan, you get a budget, you get all of these other things, because that's the biggest thing they want to know. It's like, what are you going to use this money for? How are you going to grow the practice long term?
mm-hmm,
But you can't even write that until you have a mission and a vision.
mm,
What is your purpose? Who do you want to serve? What do you want to do? Once you
mm,
have that in place, the rest of the business plan is going to fall into place, right?
mm-hmm,
Because you don't have to recreate the wheel. And we are giving people some of that, but the banks will give you a form and say, okay, let's fill this out.
mm-hmm,
uh but if you don't know what your purpose is, all of that's for naught, because you can
mm,
say whatever you want in the budget, but then you have no focus to get any of that done. And then you just spinning your wheels, right? So the reason I
yeah.
was able to get my practice open in 6 weeks is because I had a plan. I was like, listen, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this, and I had a good lawyer who was really able to kind of help me with some of the incorporation things and that kind of part of it. Um, and I had we was talking about my family. My sister is my business manager. She's my right hand, and she was there to kind of take the on some of the projects that I couldn't do myself. She was the person who got us credentialed and kind of got us moving in that
Mm,
direction. But that was because I had the plan in place. I knew what my
yeah.
mission was. I had already established my vision, and that was my game plan. That's where I move. Even to this day, that's how I've learned to move. I
Mm,
move based on what's going to get me to that vision. We started. So we was telling you about the non. I mean the the homeless things that we do
Hmm.
in the community. Part of what we're doing now is moving into a nonprofit. So kind of splitting up what we do in the office and what we do in the community so that we can get greater funds and resources to be able to do more of the work that we're doing. And my plan is the same, right? I need a
Yeah.
mission, I need a vision, and then I put those things in place. And having done it through the Kelly Collaborative Medicine, KCM
Hmm.
Cares is moving and it's not as fast only because we have to go through the government to get a 401c3.
Mm.
Uh,
Government's always
but
slow, right?
they are the rate limiting factor in all this. But we have those things in place. We have a board. I have staff. And just like we've talked about, like building a team, you
Hmm.
have to have a team around you of people that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I made sure in building my board that I had people that are nurses, that are nurse practitioners, that are business people that work in banks, that do the things that I need input on to sit on the board and be a part of that discussion. Again, pulling in those experts, pulling in from places that I don't know. Because
Yeah.
even at this point, having been in practice for 8 years, having been out of medical school for 17 years, like I still don't know everything. We definitely aren't perfect. We make mistakes every single day.
Right.
But having those people in my corner and supporting those things that you do, that's what's going to drive you.
Yeah, it sounds like the main kind of thing is focus, right? It's like putting on the blinders and focusing on these key areas makes all the difference, even in the
Hmm.
business plan, right? From the mission, values for your business, and what exactly you want to do, because most people who start a private practice, they know the target audience or patients that they want to serve
Hmm.
or they're going to serve, but they don't really understand the mission of their practice. And it seems kind of
Hmm.
like, of course we want to help people with their health, but that's kind of
Right.
general. You got to go a little
Yeah.
bit deeper, because then you're going to be able to connect on a deeper level with your patients as well. And this is where it also gets into brand building and marketing, which is what I work with on doctors with. And when they're able to go deeper, like it really kind of lays out the plan for the direction. And that's really kind of what it is. It's like
Hmm.
laying out a map in front of you. If you want to go from point A to point B, there's multiple paths on how you can get there, depending on which path you take. But putting together these key elements actually gives you the which
Hmm.
path that you need to go down to get to it. So
Exactly.
yeah, great insights. Thank you. Another thing I wanted to ask you about is common financial pitfalls that, starting a practice. We talked about,
Yeah.
it can be very expensive. There's a lot of costs involved. And I know this is something super scary to a lot of doctors because they could potentially going from an employee making a couple $100,000 a year, going into a practice where you don't know how much you're going to make. And
Hmm.
so
Yep.
if they're not careful with the financial aspect of it, they could go under pretty quickly, right? And they
Yeah.
might not make it to the
Yeah.
first year or even 2 years. And
Hmm.
this is something I think is a common thing that a lot of doctors are struggling with, because I know myself, even in my own um, business, I talk to a lot of doctors who they're coming to me asking for help in marketing. They need more patients. They don't know what to do. They started their business like 6 months ago, and they just don't know what to do. And they're kind of like
Yeah.
flabbergasted. They spent all this money on a location, a nice location, but nobody's showing up. And then they're coming
Hmm.
asking for help. And then
Exactly.
I asked them, what's your marketing budget? And they said they don't have one. So I'm like, okay, well, let's
Yep.
start there. I think you need to back up before you ever talk to somebody for help with like marketing or patient acquisition. You should have planned for that down, at the beginning, because by the time you get to the point where there's no choice, well, you don't have any budget to spend on it anyway. And
Hmm.
these things aren't free. And there is some free marketing. And if that's all, if you don't have a budget, print some flyers and walk around and pass them out. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You know what I mean? So it's like the financial aspect, I think, is one of the keys to success. So I wanted to hear your, I guess, opinion on number
Yeah.
one, what pitfalls to watch out for, but then what are the key things to really, really laser focus in on when you're starting that
Yeah.
practice?
I think, and I said this a little bit earlier, I think the biggest pitfall I've seen is that people do these extravagant build outs. Like
Right.
you got to kind of really recognize what you're going to get the return on investment for, and having some of these really, and they're beautiful spaces, but having some of these different things in your office are not going to have a return on investment. The insurance is still gonna pay what they pay if you take insurance. You still gonna be limited to you can only see so many patients in a day. So, the most patients I've seen in a day is 33. And I probably could have seen more if I would have just kept pushing myself. But you gotta say no, right? You
Right.
gotta be like, no,
Right.
I'm
Because
not
you'll
gonna
get
see
burnt
more than
out
that.
eventually.
You do. And you also got all this other paperwork and stuff you have to do on the other side. So no, you don't want to do that. So I think being realistic about your office space in terms of appearance, you may have to put in a little bit more of the blood, sweat, and tears on the initial part of that. Like putting together something from IKEA versus going and having this custom build come in with the
Mm.
contractor, right? So
Mm-hmm.
looking at places that you can be frugal, but also as you make that budget, being realistic that if you're gonna see patients, you're probably gonna get about $125 an hour. I mean, a pet per patient when you see them. So when you go through and saying, okay, if I have to see this many patients, this is what I'm gonna get on the other side. I always tell my clients, you need to budget for 5 new patients a day. Like you
Mm.
need to be building on that, and kind of for the first year, you need to be having at least 5 new patients a day that are coming into your office. So from your standpoint of the branding, you got to find that balance, right? If you don't,
Right.
your budget is going to come from somewhere. It's going to come from either you not being able to see patients because you're out putting up flyers, even though you see that as free marketing, that's taken away from what you're bringing in. So
Yep.
you're at a deficit, right? Your budget's going to be limited by that. So you get what you pay for.
Mm-hmm.
Pay for somebody who has the expertise to go out and put you into those places that can get you what you need. For me, initially, it was ZocDoc. ZocDoc was wonderful at getting me patients in. My medical society was great, and it was minimal. The dues is $500 a year. You know, I also, I'm in the Medical Alumni Association, so there's some access to that. And taking Medicaid, they assign you patients free. You don't have to do
Mm.
anything. You just got to sign up to be able to take the insurance. So I think looking at those aspects, yes. But I went and put flyers on cars and went to community events and did that kind of stuff. But there is a cost and a toll on that. If you don't
Mm.
have the time to go out and do
Mm-hmm.
that, then you need to pay someone for that. And like I said, even
Right.
if you have the time to go do it, that's time that you are taking away from seeing patients or spending time with your family, which is just as valuable. If you spend
Yeah.
it every Saturday doing a community event and then you still seeing patients during the day and doing those kind of things, when do you have time to decompress, to take some self-care time and to spend time with those people that re-energize you, right?
Right.
I've been telling this to people. I'm gonna be a little personal, I guess. At some point I got so busy, I was at 300 pounds. I wasn't taking care of myself. I was going from this place to this place. I was still working at night because
Mm.
I wasn't, like I said, I didn't have that confidence in my practice yet to be like, okay, I can stop working. I'm gonna have so I was a nocturnist at the hospital, which was also a good way to get patients. So I would see them at night and they would come see me in the
Mm.
office later because they liked me. I would take
Yeah.
care of them when they were being admitted, but it wasn't good for my health. I was
Mm.
burning the candle on both sides and I could not be focused because I wasn't sleeping. And
Mm.
I had gained all this weight and you feel sick on the inside. And I really had to stop and sleep, first of all,
Mm.
get active, eat right, do the things I'm telling my patients to do. So that then, like I said, when that fog of doubt, that fog of not resting was gone, I could be present and be here and make my practice happen. And then give the time back to my body so that I don't
Mm.
get burnt out. Right. So I go to the
Yeah.
gym. I am involved in other organizations that I think feed into me and fill me back up, because you have to have that feeling. You can't just go out and fill other people without your own vessel being full and being full with positivity. Because if you
Mm.
around people that aren't giving you that positive reinforcement, I think as a consultant, I try to be a cheerleader of really caring about them from a health standpoint too, because if you don't do the things that I'm trying to coach you to do, you're going to see a physical, mental part of it too,
Mm.
not just the financial. So some of it is you have to look at the whole person. And this is something I do in my practice and I do in my consulting, and I try to do with different aspects of my life. Like, you got to see the forest for the trees, right? You got to see this as a whole and a collective. And so if you just look at it as I'm gonna just start a practice and all I need to do is open up shop, the rest of the forest is there. That's why you pull in the marketing piece. The marketing is a part of that forest. You pull in the consultant if you need it to do those things. You pull in your medical society. You pull in other things that can help, a bookkeeper, game changer. You
Mm.
pull in
Mm-hmm.
an office manager that's full time, that's really there to support you in what you do. And yes, you can't have 20 employees from the start, but you can have. And I don't recommend your employees being your bookkeepers. Going with a bookkeeping service and a branding service on the side was the best
Yeah.
decision I ever made,
Right.
because
Right.
that's not what they do. They're not
Mm-hmm.
good at that.
Right.
An office manager is not a bookkeeper, you know.
Yeah.
And I had to learn that the hard way. I can say that on this side, that, you know, don't let your employees be your bookkeepers, but you know, you got to have some separation.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
the other thing that I'm pretty OCD about is my money, right? Like, I check my account every day. I make sure that that things are coming in. I make sure my flow is coming in from, and that's a part of it. Like, when I turn in a claim, how long does it take for that claim to be processed for the money to hit my
Mm.
account? Like, that's an
Mm.
important part of what you need to do. You have to give yourself 2 to 6 weeks for claims to be processed. And you have to have a good processor. You got to do your research. I'm very blessed. I love Athena an
Mm.
EMR,
Yeah.
because yes, I have a biller who can put in the codes and send them off, but I can do everything from that one platform.
Mm.
And so looking at the technology and doing that also saves you time and money,
Yeah.
so that you don't fall into these other pitfalls. But I'm a big advocate for doing it right the first time.
Mm.
Like, you don't want to have to put money into doing it over again. Like, yes, you should update your website. Yes, you should refresh it and that kind of thing. But you want to have a solid foundation from the beginning. If you don't have
Yeah.
that solid foundation, everything's gonna crumble, right? We're talking
Mm-hmm.
about building our house on the sand versus building
Yeah.
our house on solid ground, right?
Exactly.
So what we're doing as consultants for doctors is giving you that solid ground, so you have a foundation. So even if there's some wind and some rain and some turmoil, because there's gonna be some trials, but you can't have a testimony without a test, right? So let us help you build that foundation, so that then you can
Yeah.
come out on the other side stronger and weather those storms, weather those different things that are gonna push against you, and not make you falter, because we're not gonna let you falter, but they can kind of push you to your limits a little bit sometimes. But you got to have that foundation. And one of the parts of my course is called foundational fundamentals. You
Mm.
have to have those foundational fundamentals.
Take a quick pause from the episode to talk about our sponsor, Patient 10X. Now, Patient 10X specializes in patient acquisition. At Patient 10X, they really understand the unique challenges in the competitive market today. And when you work with them, their team of experts will work directly with you to build a customized marketing plan to attract your ideal patient every time. So head on over to patient10x.com and get started with them today. Yeah, and I think great point about, watching out for the pitfall of health. And I think a lot of doctors have, fallen into that. I know recently, it's kind of sad, but
Hmm.
a physician who was not that old passed away from some health issues. And then a couple of years ago, we
Mm.
had heard about another situation similar. But it was like a big shock because these doctors were not that old. I would say maybe they were in their 60s, which that is way too young to be dying, right? And I think the average age in America, it's like 79, I want to say 79, 80, which is still kind of young to me. You know what I mean? But like seeing these doctors again, going back to that, it's just a testament to what you're saying. The pitfall of you losing track of your own health is a huge problem,
Hmm.
and then, again, good point about the financial side of it. It does seem like a lot of where the physicians that are starting their own practice really mess up is the build out and the location. Either they're getting
Hmm.
the wrong location or they're spending way too much money just kind of like launching and starting. And I had talked to not long ago a physician who he started his own practice and he did all the bad things that you just said not to do. He spent tons of money on the location, tons of money on, the build out, and it looks beautiful. He even bought into kind of a franchise type brand for this. It was more of like a primary care brand, but he actually, and I didn't know they had this until he mentioned it, but I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But he kind of bought into like a franchise type brand, one that I've never heard of. So, I mean, I don't think it was a good one for him to buy because, but
Name recognition, right?
yeah, if people don't know it, why are you spending a bunch of money? And franchises, they charge you a bunch of money just to, jump on the back of their own work.
Exactly.
And it didn't help him. And so now he's looking at his contracts ending. He's going to want to get away from them. So now he has to basically start over, change his
Hmm.
name. He spent a lot of money to put their sign up in the building, outside the building. He spent a lot of
Oh,
money on
wow.
the building, right? So now he's just in a big pickle, and he's talking to me about patient acquisition and marketing. And, again, right back to the problem of finances,
Yeah.
how much money can you actually spend on marketing and advertising when you have to kind of start over and start your practice again. So
Yeah.
just wanted to point that out. Like that is probably one of the most important things to focus on for those doctors who are starting their new practices. Be
Yeah.
careful with that first location and launch. Don't overspend because,
Yeah.
also that's really eating into your own revenue and money that's going to
That's
be
true.
you're going to use to pay yourself. And that's one of the main reasons of starting your own business is you want to kind of have that freedom, but you can't have freedom
Yes,
unless
it
you're
is.
actually able to pay yourself and make some money, right? And sometimes that takes time, but sometimes it's faster than others depending on how well you do it.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
what would you say is your approach to building a team and staffing a practice? Because I know you talked about it earlier, how it's important to learn how to be a boss. And that's one of the key components of making that transition from employee doctor to running your own
Mhm.
business. How do you approach maybe recruiting talent or finding the right talent to put in there? Because,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, that having the plus one, it's a great tactic. And I think before that, it starts with how do you find the right candidate? Because if they
Yeah.
keep leaving you, which does happen, and in certain positions, I think it happens more than others simply because it's kind of a lower pay position. Maybe if it's like the receptionist or front desk, I see those
Hmm.
ones turn over a lot, and for a lot of doctors' practices because I found a price over here that's going to pay me $2 more an hour, and they leave, and it's like, oh my god, here we go again. We got to recruit, we
Hmm.
got to find, and if you don't have backup, you're in trouble. So I'd like to hear your approach on staffing, recruiting.
Yeah.
How do you handle that? How do you approach it?
I think it's two sides to it. So I would say from a startup standpoint, you're not gonna have another physician usually, unless you're doing a partnership or something like
Mm,
that, where they're actually paying into that so that you're going in together to start this. But what I really tried to do at the beginning is look at what I knew I would need in a day. So I tried to have two people that can do both front desk and medical assistants. And that they were trained on both so that as we go through the day, we can, if one of them had to be out, then the other one would help. And they both could kind of maneuver in both of those
mm,
spaces. I knew I needed an office manager because there's behind the scenes things that need to be taken care of during the day while I'm trying to see patients that I couldn't take care of. You got to have a biller. As much as we know we can put in the codes and stuff like that, a biller is an expert and they can get you more money to be returned to
mm,
you for based on what you put in your chart. So, trying to work with them and there's back end stuff that goes with billing too. Like once a bill goes out, if the insurance denies it, you have to send it back. And I needed people to be able to answer the phone. So I had a back of house person. And so I think I had 5 employees altogether when I first started my practice, which is a high number. Most people think they can do it with two or three, but it really allowed me to do the work that I needed to do, which was actually managing the practice and seeing the patients. Um, so I really am an advocate for building a positive team from the beginning. And one of the things I was going to say, which kind of goes into this, is making sure your personal financial home is in order. So
mm.
paying off credit cards, making sure you have some cushion at home that's not a part of your business, so that you can be free to do these things.
Right.
And as you build the budget going into the budget, build a budget for the practice that includes you being that plus one, includes you having adequate staffing for all of those things in that space. Um, and the same thing for building in your marketing budget. Like you said, it may not be as much as you think that you can do, but $1,000, $2,000, and then looking at what that is each month and how you can mold that. And like I said, I did ZocDoc, so that was $300 a
Mm,
month off the top. That was a part of my budget, and that's three patients that I got to see a month. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
I have to, three of my patients is everything I get from seeing them goes into my marketing budget. But at one point, I was generating with myself and one other provider 100 new patients a month from ZocDoc.
Mm,
So,
wow.
and that's before they changed their model. But you can think about it. If I was getting 100 patients a month and I was paying $300 a month, each of those was $3. But what I get in return for that
Yeah.
investment is phenomenal because they probably going to see me more than once. But even if
Right.
they saw me just once, 125 dollars, and I invested three, that's better than Vegas odds, right? Most of the time.
Right.
So finding
Yeah.
those different things that you can do to invest in that's going to give you that return on investment, and your labor is that. The people that you have at your front desk is that, and you also have to build a team. Again, going back to this mission and vision, what do you stand for? You have to find people that are going to stand for the same thing that you do, that want to give patients the same experience as you do. They can't come to my front desk and somebody's being rude and dismissive, right? Because they are the first impression and first face of my practice. If you come in and the front desk area is dirty and disorganized and smells, those small things make a first impression on people. So building a team of people who are not going to stink up the place, is important.
Right.
And I found that with physicians, when I'm recruiting physicians and recruiting nurse practitioners and stuff, I have to find people that are going to care for my patients the way I do, because then my
Mm.
patients don't want to see anybody else, and they'll come in. I've had it happen more than once. They're like, Dr. Kelly, I'm never seeing that other person again. I don't know what was wrong with them. They had a bad day, but they don't represent your practice adequately. I come here because of you, and I don't want to see anybody else. And I also have built the relationship with my patients. I'm like, listen, if you have a bad experience at my front desk, you need to let me know. I can't be at the front desk and be in the room with you and do all the things that I do. I expect that these people are a representation of me and of what I stand for. So if they're not meeting that expectation, then I need to know. And it is a lot of pressure, right? Like I tell people I don't expect them to be me. And I think and this is not from a boastful place, but I really try hard, because all you have sometimes is your word. So being
Hmm.
honest with people and being forthright, and trying, because I'm not perfect, trying to be the best you can be is what I try to do every day. And I tell them, I don't expect you to be me, but I expect you to be pleasant. I expect you to work hard and do
Yeah.
your job.
Hmm.
And to at least do the bare minimum expectations. The other part of that then comes to rewarding those that do well, right? And
Mm.
incentivizing them doing a good job, right? I'm not going to incentivize you for coming to work on time. Like, that's a part of your
Yeah.
job. Like, that's the bare minimum of what you can do, is come to work on time and being focused on doing your job while you're here. It's those ones who take that extra initiative, who are pleasant with my patients. Like Camille, I love Camille. She's gotten the most compliments. She will sit and make sure a patient gets from point A to point B. And that's important, because that's not what you get every day from somebody when you're on the phone
Mm.
with them. That customer service.
Right.
What I'm working on now is also, how do I give them benefits? How do I make it so they can grow? Um,
Mm.
that comes with a two-edged sword, right? So you're teaching them, you're growing them. That means that you're going to lose some of them, because they're going to
Mm.
go into different opportunities. And I can't.
Right.
I try to create different opportunities and new opportunities that can then be more money, more responsibility, and that kind of thing. But we're limited. Like, as we
Of
grow
course.
it, we get more of that. But I think that's a part of what you have to do, because you don't want people to be stale. You want them to learn, just like we have as physicians, to do continuing medical education and learn about new things. I want to do that for them too. And the last thing I'll say is that I want my patients to be heard, but I also have to make sure my employees feel heard, right? That they feel like they can come to me and say if they're having a hard time. I've been able, like, we got rid of some people, and like I said, getting rid of people is hard, because you want to keep them in an opportunity, but sometimes it's the best thing you can do. You gotta prune, you gotta cut off those dead limbs so the rest of the tree can grow, because they just
Right.
holding the rest of that back. So
Yeah.
and again, being firm and fair, giving them an opportunity to fix whatever the deficiencies are, documenting the things that you need done, and then not being afraid to pull the trigger, because the longer you let the dead part sit there, the more it can cause problems in the rest of the tree
Mm.
or the rest of the organization and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah.
building a positive team is super important in being successful moving forward in your practice.
Right, right. And I think it's important, or what I noticed was that it kind of ties back to the business plan. You know,
Mm-hmm.
that is the core foundation for what you're going to build, because your mission, your values also affects who you're recruiting and how you're recruiting them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it all kind of ties into the machine of that is your business, and it needs to be running smooth, it needs to be well oiled, and all of that comes into play with your culture and, the growth
Mm-hmm.
opportunities that your um, staff has. And it is inevitable at the end of the day, people are going to outgrow their current position, and sometimes that does mean them leaving, and that's just part of the way the world goes in business. You can't
Mm-hmm.
keep everybody for everybody, or I mean forever. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's a good point. When it comes to technology, you mentioned Athena earlier. How do you think that, in the modern medical practice, how can doctors leverage technology effectively, and how important is it, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, for your EMR, you have no choice. So the government has mandated that all medical record be electronic at this point. So you have to have some technology in your office. What we do is try to, because it can be expensive if you do too much of it.
Yeah.
But looking at how you can have it be efficient so that you can do the best job you can, and also that the patient experience can be good. So one of the things that I would tell people to look at is you have to look for those things that are going to make your job easier. Does it
Mm,
have where you can e-prescribe? Does it have where there's a patient portal, which is also a mandated part of the process with that? Can you do your billing through that, or do you need a third party biller? Like, is there room to produce reports and those kind of things so that you can be up to date on what you need to do to be better, to like increase your workflow and that kind of thing. We have automated check-in through something called Epion. So we
mm,
found that that's been helpful. And as if in primary care, if you're going to take the insurance, a lot of what we do now is this population health and quality measures. And so meeting those quality measures is important. And Epion as a partner has been great in like allowing us to accelerate that and to meet some of those goals more easily. um and like having technology when it comes to this kind of thing, so doing podcasts, having a website, all of those are positive ways and cost efficient ways to be able to get what you need to get done. I also have a AI scribe
mm,
where I would say of everything that I've talked about today in terms of making more money for myself, having an AI scribe
mm.
was life changing. I'm
Really?
still behind. I still got charts I gotta close, but I can tell you, like, sit and then from a patient engagement standpoint too, like it records what I'm like in a way that I can just sit and talk to the patient. I don't have to be typing in my computer
Mm.
the whole time.
Yeah,
And
it's
they
fantastic.
patients want that. They want you to look them in their eyes when they're talking to you. They
Right.
want them to. They want to feel that you're engaged, and so having that, and they have some that are really inexpensive, maybe $100 a month. You get what you pay for. Mine is a little more expensive than that, but I feel my notes are done within a few minutes, so it really
Mm.
accelerates. And like again, the point is getting from the point you see the patient to the point you get paid, right? Because we're in a reimbursement process. For if you take insurance, if you do a fee for service, you can charge whatever you want and you get paid it at the beginning. But if you're in the insurances and you're doing those kind of things, it's so important to be able to close those charts and send them out so they can be billed so you can get reimbursed. So
Yeah.
that's been that technology for
Mm.
me, having an AI scribe at this point, life changing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I know I was like last week, I took my daughter to her, I think, 2 year visit or wellness checkup. And the physician also had that because she was asking me, is it okay if I use this? It's a blah, blah, blah.
Hmm.
And she was explaining it to me. And it was exactly that. So I was laughing when you said that because I could see how it's really making doctors more efficient because the
Hmm.
AI has got to the point where it's really good at listening and, scribing things down. So it's perfect piece of technology for doctors to implement into their visits with the patients. And one of the biggest complaints that I see is patients complaining about the doctor not caring or not paying attention to them when they're in the clinic or when they're in their visit. So having that assistant, like you just mentioned, helps you to focus on the patient, look them in the eye, and that is going to make such a big impact, in the long run and down the road for every individual because it makes them feel heard and it makes a huge impact. And I think technology is rapidly increasing. I don't know how it's going to affect the healthcare side in terms of you guy in the clinic. That is, so the AI assistant is a perfect example of that. I kind of wonder where that's going to go to because I'm sure it's not going to stop there, And I know there's AI answering phones today. There's AI
Yeah,
doing sales calls and all these crazy things. And I think there's certain areas where we got to be careful to not replace real people because at some
exactly.
point there's going to be a practice they're trying to do AI everything, and then the patients are getting frustrated because like they want a human experience, and I think that's
Right.
never going to go away. And I
Yeah.
think that's going to be the next kind of frontier where doctors and practices are going to stand out from others when the ones that are trying to do it the cheap way, not hire employees, they're just trying to do
Exactly.
AI everything,
Yep.
and then the ones who are doing it right, it's costing them more, but that's the experience that people ultimately want. Like we're not
Yeah.
robots yet, so we do care
Right.
that we did the human interaction.
And I think that speaks to like why
um,
people don't always
that's
like
awesome.
telemedicine. Like we've had to use it a lot. It's hit or miss. I have some people who love
Mm,
it. They don't ever want to come to the office. But for me, I get something out of the patient experience too, right? Being able to hug your patient when they need you to hug them, being able to have them feel your energy in the room because it's different. Even talking to you on a podcast is different than we were sitting in front of each other, vibing off each other's energy. It's a little bit different. And I think that patients will tell me, I don't want to do telemedicine. I want to come into the office. I want to see you, and be in your space. And that's important too. So yeah, I think that we do got to be careful that we don't lose the empathy because like I said, you can't feel the vibe in the room. You can't
mm,
get the person's energy. You can't hug a patient through the technology. And sometimes that's all they need to hear is your voice and you saying
Right.
like it's gonna be
Right.
fine, like we can do this. And sometimes, from a problem solving standpoint, you need a human touch in that problem solving because it's not just about an algorithm, right? And I think that's what we find in some of the training that's coming up now is that people being taught algorithms and not how to critically think. And critical thinking is still important in how you weigh all those things together. And we talk about this like from a Google standpoint. I'm sure you see this in marketing too. Like you can't go on Google and be like, I have a headache, what do I do? And then it's going to tell you got a brain tumor, right? Because that's the first thing that
Right.
comes up
Right.
when you put in headache in Google. And that's not what every headache is, right? That's not to say that some couldn't be that, but you need to have some of that critical thinking part in there. And I think that's where you got to understand the limitations of technology. I do think that technology has allowed us to actually provide better access and some equity in terms of that. But then, I think about my homeless patients. A big part of that contract and some of the challenges that we've been facing is like nurses want to be remote.
Mm.
And you can't be remote when you're doing bedside nursing. Like you
Right.
have to be
Right.
in with the patient. And we're also talking about people who are unhoused, and I shouldn't say homeless. I should say people who are experiencing homelessness
Mm.
because that's not who they are.
Yeah.
But people who are unhoused, they may not have a phone. They don't have adequate, transportation to get to the clinic. So we go and are present where they are and are giving them the exposure to equitable healthcare where they are. And I think telemedicine has allowed us to do some of that. So patients who otherwise felt like they were in a bit of a medical desert, at least from the standpoint of giving, adequately working through the problems and giving them some ideas and some plans to move forward, we've been able to really expand that access. Rural medicine, we talk about they have different machines that they can leave in these different places. And when you can hear the patient's heartbeat on the other
Mm.
side, you can look in the back of their eye, you can examine the inside of the ear. So through the connection through an iPhone,
Wow.
and so I think some of that, and we look at it from an international standpoint, these are things that we've been working on for a long time where there are places that don't have access. And I think we don't always think about the access limitations that are right here in the United States. We're like one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest country in the world, and we still have people who don't have access to quality health care, and don't have an understanding of their health in a way that they can be productive about it. One of the things that I noticed, a little bit off topic, but when as an anthropology major, what I wanted to do was actually I was going to go to Russia, so I spoke Russian. I don't
Oh
speak it
wow.
very well anymore. I wanted to do Russian health studies and look at like how health was impacted by the transition from communism um, to democracy, because capitalism can
Mm.
mess up a lot of things.
Yeah.
But a part of that is I studied what grocery stores look like in different
Mm.
communities. So in DC, I went into a mostly white community, a privileged community, and looked at what their stores look like, what access that people have to healthy food choices and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went into some grocery stores in the predominantly black parts of town, which have changed quite a bit over the last 20 years, and looking at what that looks like, right? It's the
Mm.
same thing with healthcare. If you go into some of these more affluent communities, you see a difference in the healthcare
Wow.
than what you see in some of the less prominent communities. And especially when it
Interesting.
comes to college students, I don't know if and you talked about Texas a little bit. So Prairie View A&M is in Texas, and
Mm-hmm.
my niece was attending there, and so we went to our campus. And what was like strikingly negligent, in my opinion, I don't think it's the university's fault, but there was not a grocery store within walking distance for these students. The only access they had to food, other than what was on campus, was a corner convenience store, which was across a busy highway. And I think that other people are in food deserts as well. My mom lives in rural Georgia. We just came back from seeing her, there's two options for groceries. Well, I guess three if you consider the gas station, little
Mm.
grocery stores.
Mm-hmm.
That there's Family Dollar and Dollar General.
Mm.
There's a Harvey's grocery store, one in the whole little town, and
Wow.
a Walmart.
Wow.
That's it. The other food choices, you look at the food options, and this does speak to health because
Yeah.
our options and availability of food is a big deal.
Right.
There's nothing but fast food. There's nothing but uh,
Mm.
you know, stuff that's processed. You don't see a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables like farm. level of things, even though there's farms around. You have to search those things out. So I think, people are going in those communities, especially people, black and brown people, and then not having access to any of those healthy food choices, and then not having access to adequate health care. That's a recipe for a disaster. They're not getting preventive care. They're putting toxins in their bodies that are causing either early cancer or diabetes, or sugar in itself. Processed sugars is that we need to limit that. But they don't have access to anything else. If you go into a Dollar General to get groceries, like, what quality of food are you getting from a Dollar General, a Family
Right. Is
Dollar,
it even real
in those
food? You know?
communities?
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate and sad, and we got to do better. We have to do better about creating these spaces, and that equity, in what we do for each other.
Yeah.
And it comes the same in housing. Like, that's the reason we have such a problem with homelessness and unhoused communities. I'm sure you see this a lot in California as well, a very affluent state, the biggest state in the union, and they have a homeless issue. We have a homeless issue here, and some of it is because there is racial injustice that's continuing in housing, and housing is healthcare. People who are unhoused, like, age 15 years faster than most other people. So a patient
Hmm.
that's coming in to see me that's 50 is really 65
Wow.
in their health age,
Yeah.
because they've been unhoused. There's a huge disproportion of people who are suffering from mental health issues. And that's not to say that everybody who's experiencing homelessness has mental health issues, but there's a larger proportion of them. And here, it's a larger proportion of the Black and African American. And if you go into a housing system that is asking for additional things that they can't produce, or discriminated against them
Mm.
because of their race or their ethnicity, then you create you it personifies the problem. It perpetuates the problem. And then you look at how expensive it is, especially in some of these major cities, to actually live. I mean, in DC, I don't think you can get a studio apartment for less than $1,200 a
Mm.
month. Like, how many people are making that? And then you have people that are against having a living wage. Montgomery County, I will say, especially for the contracts that we have, our living wage is 15 I'm sorry, so it's $17.40 now,
Mm.
and every year it increases. And us as contracts are expected to pay our people at least that much, so at least the living wage.
Right.
But you still are spending huge amounts of that on housing. And even for our unhoused people who are in these different programs, they want to show that you have an income of four times what you are gonna spend
Yeah.
on housing. Like, how unrealistic is
Yeah.
that for most people,
Mm-hmm.
to make four times what they're spending in housing, when housing is so expensive? So I think, yes, this is off topic of what what we do, but again, it's seeing the forest for the trees. Like, we can't be healthy individuals if we're unhoused, if we're not having adequate access to food and adequate access to healthcare.
Right.
All of those things play a role. And so, how do we figure out how to do that to make sure that people get that we can all get there, right? It shouldn't be a haves or a have not.
Mm-hmm.
And again, kind of, these things work against themselves, because yes, I'm telling people to do those things, but I'm also wanting them to do what's best for them.
Yeah.
You still have to be full, and you still have to enjoy what you do. But we got to find a happy medium. We got to find a way to make this work, and really get to the bottom of it and make it a better place overall.
Right. And I think as doctors, start their own private practices, this gives them flexibility to kind of help out like you're doing
Hmm.
into these communities, because there are definitely underserved in every area. So as a
Hmm.
physician, I think that's an important kind of note to pay attention to, depending on what area you're established in. You know, there's always going to be underserved people in areas in every state. Like you said, even in California, I mean, this place is crazy,
Hmm.
crazy expensive as well. New York and California, it's just out of control. Half the time I don't know how some people can afford to live here with, minimum wage jobs. How do they pay rent? It doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
and that's, again, we're not even getting into the healthcare component. There's a lot of homeless um, people, temporary homeless, I guess you would say, in the area,
Hmm.
because the housing is so expensive. And it's
Exactly.
interesting. And I've noticed, in the area, I've seen more people living in their cars, actually. Like in
Hmm.
parking lots, all of a
Yeah.
sudden I'll see a car like packed to the, like, can't even see in the windows with personal
Hmm.
items. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh, well, that's interesting. Like, I've seen that if more than normal the last couple months, and it didn't really hit me until now that we're talking about this. But, you know,
Yeah.
I think as doctors having their own practices, this is a key thing to focus on, because that's a way that you guys
Hmm.
can really help out the community. And
Yeah.
So switching gears a little bit into, more like the marketing and side of things, what would you say, the role of marketing and branding? What role does that play in the success of a new private practice, would you say?
I feel like it's huge. Like having a brand and really, and some of it is you build a brand, right? Like it's not, you just don't automatically have it, but you have to again focus. And I think having that, even like having a brand package, what colors are you going to use? What fonts? What's going to represent you is an important part of that process. Like the logo for Kelly Collaborative Medicine includes a stethoscope in it. So the Y creates a
Mm,
stethoscope that goes into, I think, to the O of the
hmm.
collaborative part. And that was important for me because I wanted it to speak to what I do in healthcare. Like I
Right.
wanted to make sure that was spoken for, and some like in I've tried to keep that brand of having a stethoscope in my thing as I go forward, right?
Mm,
But that
yeah.
had to be kind of the focus. So then it's recognizable, right? We talk about brand recognition all the time. When you see an apple with a, the Apple logo when you see it. I want people to feel the same way about things that are associated with Kelly Collaborative Medicine. I want them to see it and know that this is what we stand for. And again, going back to your mission and vision, that's what I'm living every day. That's what I'm creating. When you market that, you also have to take into account how do you want it to be perceived. So I think you get the experts that, and this is a part of having worked with you on revising my website and stuff. We had conversations about what do I stand for? How do I want my patients to feel when they see my website? I was very adamant that I wanted them to know that I was a woman of color and that I take care of a diverse population of people. I wanted it to feel bright and I wanted it to feel hip,
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
like I'm in touch with the different things that are going on. I'm a little old school for certain things. I still like books with paper, but it
Yeah.
kind of comes with territory. But I need to be able to engage. I need to be able to have a social media presence
Mm,
because that's how you keep up.
right.
Right now, if you don't have a YouTube channel as a physician or Instagram or something like that, and you haven't already built your brand,
Mm,
that's one of the easiest, most economical ways to build your brand. And having someone like you that can focus that, right? That can make the feel on the Instagram look like the
hmm.
feel on the Snapchat, that has the look of the feel on the website. All of
Yeah.
those things have to kind of come together because if it's disjointed, then people are like, well, what are they doing in
Right.
the office? Like if this part is disjointed, if this is messy, if there's spelling errors and there's, just stuff that's not correct, what is that saying about your practice
Yeah.
or your business
Yeah.
in general as a whole? And I think, and like I said, I'm not perfect. I'm still working out. I have to reach out to people to get help because I can't do all of those things myself. I have to have someone who is monitoring how my reflection goes out into the world. And so that's why I feel like the brand and the marketing plays such a great role. And again, you have to be able to want patients to want to come see you. And what's the best way to do that than to give them a piece of what you look like in these different places? Like before, and I don't know if you're old enough to have done this. We get phone books every year.
Hmm.
You get to go look if you want to look for a medical practice. If they got a big enough ad in the phone book, that's
Yeah.
gonna be the first thing that you see.
Mm,
I think that social media and marketing and stuff, how it is now, gives us a little more equal footing. So even a small practice can make a big social media
right.
presence. They
Yeah.
can they can seem like they're on the same footing as some of the other places that are much more wide open and in terms of having more locations and more providers. But I can create a social media presence that outshines all of that.
Hmm.
So I think that does give us some equity, and but having the right people behind you and having people that understand and share
Mm,
in what you want to do, right? Whoever you're seeing has to share and understanding my struggles as a Black woman, as a business owner. They have to understand that and be able to pull from that in positive ways. And like I said, I'm not trying to make it black and white, but all of these things play into
yeah.
how we're perceived, how
Absolutely.
we get put out into the world and how people respond to us. So, I think the biggest thing for me is that I want to be seen as professional. I want to be seen as uh, articulate, and not from a negative standpoint, but I want people to have confidence in what I
Yeah.
do because your health is super important.
Hmm.
So I can't go in and not look the part and not uh, be polished and those kind of things. But part of my polish is also I want to be real about who I
Hmm.
am, and I don't always say all the words right. I'm a little country, and that's okay. but I can prove that I know my stuff.
Right.
Like
Right.
that's the most important thing. It's not necessarily those other things, but I do want to come off as professional, that I care about myself, that I care about my patients, and care about my practice, and having people that can take that out of you, like to go in and say, I don't want to change you, but let's amplify these different things that are just so great about you. I've been very blessed to have people around me that can do that. Um, and then that I can go back and partner with, because I know that they come from the same place. You know what I'm saying?
Mm,
That they're out here caring about people and wanting
yeah.
to make a change, and they're honest. They are stand up people. Because I tell my patients all the time, it's like, I'm gonna try to send you to good people. I'm gonna try to send you to people that care about you,
Hmm.
because that all of them don't. And having worked with you and with some other people that I work with, like, y'all are the real deal. Y'all are caring and honest and do good work. You know what I'm saying? And that's the most important part.
Yeah. 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 Great insights. And I think, to your point, perception is not always reality, but building a cohesive brand when you're starting a new business, and that kind of goes for any business, but for a medical practice, it's super important because people care about the quality of the healthcare that they're going to get. Talked about the getting haircuts, the quality of the experience that they're going to have is super important. And if somebody doesn't know you, their perception of you and how they judge you is going to be based on the elements that you put out that represent you. And
Hmm.
what is that? That is your logo, that's your branding, it's your colors, it's your mission, your values, your social media content, if you have any.
Exactly.
And if you don't have any, you reach another good point where the generation today, the TikTok and social media generation, they're all about that. And if you're not
Hmm.
there and you're not present, the chances are they're going to go to a competitor who is there, you know, and this is
Hmm.
kind of becoming the new frontier, is like content creation. Capturing attention
Hmm.
is becoming the new thing. On the good side is, it's mostly free. The bad side is
Hmm.
it takes time to create this. It doesn't come easy.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of thinking. You don't just like throw a camera up and start, talking. Like, you have to actually plan out this stuff. It doesn't just, so having those experts with you and working with you, like you mentioned, it is definitely a key component, I would say, as well. Um, the other thing that I was wondering from your experience is, how important does the relationships in with the other physicians in your community, how does that drive success for your practice, and does that help you?
Yeah.
You talked about it earlier with being in the building with other specialists that you can refer to and they refer to you, so it sounds like you do have experience on that front. And I think, my inkling is that it is a very important key component to kind of just attracting new patients and building a strong patient base. But I'd like to hear your
Yeah.
insights on that.
I think just even outside of the patients, like your own personal growth and personal development as a physician, is super important to have them. Like, I have my colleagues that I can text them anytime, like, listen, I got this rash. I don't know what to do. And having that kind of relationship with people that they know they can count on you, if I need to see a patient for them, they can text me and let me know. It's super helpful in what I do in the community. So what I do for the homeless, like, I really, they say I bullied them into it, but I'll take this bullying. I will own up to this bullying, that I bullied them into taking Medicaid. Um, because I spoke to them about how
Yeah.
important it is for me to
Yeah.
be able to send patients to people who are going to take care of them,
Right.
and they have access. And the only way I can get that is if they agree to join these different programs. And so it makes my heart happy that they uh value my opinion enough to be like, okay, I'm gonna try it because you said it. So having those relationships is important. Having those friendships within that too, I think that helps prevent burnout. Like, having these safe spaces that you can go in and have some conversations with people, and they understand what you're going through because they're going through it too, is important. Like I said earlier, I'm an advocate, a huge advocate of being a part of joining your local medical societies if you're a
Mm,
physician. It's free networking.
yeah.
You go, you take some cars, they have events, you can get cars from other people. If, as primary care is super important, because I need specialists to send out to. The specialists, it's so important to know the primary cares in your community, to know the hospitals, to know the ERs, because that's where you're going to get um your publicity from people doing that. And
Right.
going up even a step, getting privileges at your local hospital. You may not see patients in the hospital, but getting privileges, you get put on their list, that if there's people who are
Mm,
unaffiliated, they'll send them to you in your practice. So it could be any specialty. If there's somebody who comes in and they need a gastroenterologist, they refer specifically to certain gastroenterologists because they're part of the medical team, the medical staff at the hospital.
right.
and like I said, it doesn't mean you have to go in and do procedures and stuff, but that you get on these lists and that you have these other avenues that you can
Yeah.
get patients to come in, and that comes from those relationships.
Right.
Um, and also speaking to the medical society, what we do in Montgomery County, we're really advocates. So, part of I serve as the secretary for that group, and I also sit on the Montgomery Cares Advisory Board, which is uh, our county's kind of undocumented, uninsured access points for patients, the safety net clinics that are in the county and that kind of thing. So I sit on the advisory board for that. We are advocates. We have to advocate not only for our patients but for ourselves. We have to go to our lawmakers, and it's not partisan. I'm not pushing an agenda based on who I'm affiliated with. It is what's right. It is what's in the best interest of the patients I take care of, and for us to be able to recruit physicians and providers that want to come and serve the population in our area,
Yeah.
and be a part of this process, and making sure that there's not. So one of the big things we've been pushing for is something called prior authorizations. And I feel like everybody's heard about prior authorizations. You send something, you go to your doctor, they say, okay, you need this treatment. We send it to the insurance company, they deny it. They be like, you need a
Yeah.
prior authorization. You need
Yeah.
to specify why this patient needs that. It's become a hindrance to us being able to take care of our patients. And so we've been pushing as a medical society to try to limit that and to try to make it so that it's a seamless process so that we can get the things we need for our patients. Because you can imagine, we go back to this time thing, for every, let's say in a day, I, like yesterday, I saw 19 patients in the morning, and then yes, I did on a Saturday.
Wow.
um, of those patients, I probably sent out medications for more than half. So let's say 60%
Mm.
got a medication, and at least, you know, 20% are going to need a par off. So if you think about 20% every single day that you're getting, let's say it's 2 to 3. It may not seem like a lot, but that's 2 to 3 people that you have to sit and put in all this information. They're gonna deny it again, and you have to go and appeal and talk to a physician or someone else at
Mm.
the insurance company to tell them this patient needs this for this reason. This is why. That takes so much time out of your day.
Wow.
And I actually have a staff member that's what the majority of their job is
Mm.
to sit and do prior authorizations all day, every day,
Wow.
or almost all day, every day. She
Yeah.
does front desk stuff though, but she also
Mm.
has to sit and try to get my prior authorizations done. We're very lucky that the majority we can do electronically now. We don't have
Mm.
to fill out the paperwork and that kind of thing, but it's a huge hindrance on what we do as practitioners. So we have to advocate and support those organizations that are going to advocate. Now, not everybody can serve on the board and not everybody can do those things. Yes, your time is precious, but being a part of that and giving to that and understanding the process, and the medical society is super important because they give free CME.
Mm.
They, like I said, you get the free networking
Yeah.
opportunities. I've gotten to sit with my lawmakers multiple times for free. I don't have to do anything. They come to us. We have listening things. I get to say, I just was on one about a week ago on a Tuesday morning. That's my administrative time. I sat on there for that hour, and I got to say my piece about what keeps me up at night,
Mm.
what makes me not want to practice medicine, right?
Yeah.
And what things that, and I told them, I was like, I need more people to take Medicare and Medicaid, because I need to be able to have access for my patients. And so I
Mm.
think, that gives me that opportunity to advocate and be a part of that process. And that's where your colleagues come in and they can support you, and they send you patients, and they send you my physical therapist, they always send us unhealthy snacks, but they send you snacks.
Yeah.
And they're cheerleaders, and they're gonna put that brand out there for you too, because they're gonna support you. Say, oh, won't you go see Dr. Kelly? A lot of patients will come and say, I went to see the GYN and she told me to come here to see you.
Mm.
Or I saw this specialist. I have some pain specialists across the street. They told me that I should see you. Or the hospital. I used to work at night, like I was saying earlier, in the hospital, and so I still know a lot of the ER docs. And it's like, yeah, go see Dr. Kelly. You got to go back and see them. Or they're going to the hospital, and one of the internists still works there that admits patients, like, yeah, Dr. Kelly's my doctor. So that's important. That
Nice.
community, and
Yeah.
that, and they will call me and be like, your patient's here. This is what we need. Like, this is what's going on.
Mm.
And so I think that creates an atmosphere where you feel supported,
Yeah.
and you feel that you can do the job that you need to do, and that you can call on people for help, because we all need each other.
Right.
And like I said, it's invaluable to be able to text somebody who's a dermatologist, because that's probably my weakest link. And be like, this person has this rash. What is this? What should I do?
Mm.
And them be kind enough to reach out and help you in those times that you need it, because they know that I would reciprocate that.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, I think you. cannot go wrong with any networking, and the relationships like you're talking about sounds like you have a strong community, and you have strong relationships within the community. And so not only does that bring you new patients, but that helps you, like you said, with the patient care. And overall, it just gives you more opportunities for growth, for your private practice. And I think that's amazing. Now, what would you say
But I will
for,
say, I want to tell you one of the negatives because I think
mm,
it is a negative side to that sometimes, but more from a like patient, like knowing you're out there in those spaces. You have to still be careful what you post on social media. You have to be careful, um, because like so for example, I'm a Girl Scout troop leader. I know I do
mm.
too much stuff. And so we go for this Girl Scout weekend thing, and the person checking in, all the scouts is one of my patients, right?
Mm,
So I try to. That's why it's important to be authentic
yeah.
and to be yourself, because you can't be authentically nice in the office and
Mm,
be a
in the
jerk
real
out
world.
in the
Yeah.
community. And I went to the CBC dinner last night, and my husband was introducing me to somebody at the table, and I was like, she looks so familiar, like I know her from somewhere. And she was one of my patients when she lived here. She moved away. So
Ah,
I try to like when we talk about marketing and branding, like being authentic is
yeah.
so important because you're gonna see these people outside of that, and if they don't, if you're a jerk, it's gonna bleed through. Like
Right.
you can't fake that.
Yep.
You can't fake a real good laugh in a room. It just doesn't work. So you got to be authentic in that.
Yeah. No, 100%. I like that. As you run your private practice, you're probably super busy. And I know you are because we've talked about it before in the past. And that I think that's an important thing to bring up is the work life balance. So I'm wondering for you, what is the number one, how do you do it? But then number two, what's your advice to those who are going to start their practice? They don't know what they're stepping into. How would you give them advice on, how to approach the work life balance? Because some people, I think they overlook it. We talked about the health component, it's a pitfall that doctors fall into because they get too busy. So what would you say about that?
Yeah. I think one of the things that's very unique about my practice is that my providers are almost all women. I do have one male nurse practitioner that works in the shelter with me, but they're all women. And I think as being a business owner, if you're gonna employ women, you have to support women, right?
Mm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
there are things that women are gonna go through if they want children, if they've chosen to be married, that are gonna be life events that you're gonna have. They're gonna get pregnant if they want that to be a part of their experience. They're gonna have children that are sick if they're caregivers. They're gonna have parents that are sick, and this goes for all of my employees. But I'm very uniquely set up in that all of them are females.
Mm.
And that creates a different atmosphere in the office and things like
Yeah.
that. Um, but it is hard to find that work life balance. Like I think a part of for me, and I used to be embarrassed to say this, is I have somebody who comes into my house and helps me. My husband is very busy too, and it was in residency. In residency is 80 hours a week. I my oldest daughter she's about to be 30 years old. My grandbaby's 17 months old. But when I was in residency, I had my son, my son he's 17 now. I had him 6 weeks into my residency.
Wow.
And so being a new mom, even though I had been a mom already before, but having a brand new baby, working overnights, 80 hours a week, and then feeling like I couldn't connect with my husband
Mm.
because we'd have to be cooking and cleaning and
Mm-hmm.
doing those kind of things. And we made a decision then to have someone come and help us clean our house. And it's something that, again, goes to this: you can't do it
Yeah.
all. You can have it all, but just not all at the same time.
Right. Right.
you know so and once we come into where we are now as a business owner, and having these different projects and really want to be able to spend the time I have at home with my children, we have someone that comes in every day and helps us. And my children are older, so I don't need someone to be there 24 hours a day, but she comes, she helps with pickups, she'll help with dinner, with laundry and those kind of things. And that might make me an elitist, I guess, in the grand scheme of things when it comes to that. I know how to clean toilets. I worked at McDonald's. That was my first
Mm.
job. And I loved working at McDonald's. I had so much fun. I waited tables and I've done all the
Yeah.
jobs, like, but if I want to be able to make the changes that I'm making with my patients and with what I do in the community, I have to be supported.
Right.
I have a wonderful village of people. I think that that's another thing that you have to have. My husband is super supportive. Like a few months ago, he was just being so nice to me. And I was like, why are you being so nice to me? Not that your husband should be nice to you,
Yeah.
right? Like he was just being thoughtful and like going above and beyond. And he told me, he was like, I know that work is stressful. I don't want you to be stressed at home too. And if that's not what a partnership is, I don't know what it is, right? Like I have been so blessed to have people who support me in what I do and believe in me and believe that what I'm doing is the right thing to do. that helps me get that balance, right? Because he takes on the weight so that I don't have to take it all on
That's
myself,
great. Yeah.
And in my office, building that team of people, because sometimes I think about my office manager was out on an emergency, and you miss them when when they're gone,
Yeah.
because I came in one morning and the phones weren't working, and so
Mm.
I had to call to get the phones to get working, and usually I don't even realize it's a problem because she's already taken care of it,
Right.
or the iPads aren't working. She'll text me and say the iPads aren't working, we got it back, or this patient had this issue, I already took care of it. Like, you don't know how much of that you miss.
Yeah.
I don't have to worry about making a schedule. Everybody knows when they gotta come in. She does the ordering for the office. I don't have to worry about those
Mm.
things. And having that support is how I make my life work. Um, my sister is a godsend. She gives me the opportunity to with my kids. She's a trusted hand. My sister in
Mm.
law as well. That if me and my husband wanted to travel and spend some quality time together, my sister will come and sit with be with the kids so they can go to school and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And we also try to plan some time to go places together. I'm a big advocate for taking your time off. I know people get mad if I'm gone for a week, but I deserve to have some time off just
Right.
like everybody
Right.
else. I deserve to have some friendships and some things that I enjoy. Usually, my life is pretty boring outside of what I do in the office because, like, most nights, I go home and I know how it's gonna work. So if I don't get it
Mm.
done before I leave the office, it's gonna be here the next morning. Because when I go and sit in my house, one child is gonna be on this hip, and the other one is usually gonna be on my lap because she's done. They want to fight over who's get to sit closest to me, and I count my blessings every day because some people don't have that relationship with their children, but they want to come and just sit next to you. And like Friday night, I'm getting ready to go to the Power 100 reception,
Yeah.
and my 29-year-old calls me, and I'm like, what do you want? I know it's got to be something. She's like, I was just thinking about you. I was like, what do you need? Is it something? She's like, no, I don't need anything. I just was calling because I was thinking about you, and like, you got to make time for those things too. So I
Yeah.
probably was a little bit later to my event than I wanted to be, but it was important to sit and stop and take time to spend with her
Yeah.
and to check in on the people around you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a group of friends. All our daughters are about the same age,
Mm.
and we spend a lot of time together. But they also are such a wonderful resource when it comes to just having some support. Like, me and my husband had the events this weekend, and my daughter could spend the night, with them, so that we could attend the things that we needed to attend. And my son has autism, so we try not to leave him home by himself, even though he's 17. So my niece came over and sat with him last night and just made sure he was, had stuff to do and things like that. So it's important, and I also try to make time to support my family. So my niece lives with me. She's a chiropractor now. She's super awesome. My nephew lived with me while he was in college, and I created these spaces for them to be able to be successful too.
Mm.
But because I wouldn't be where I am without somebody helping me.
Yeah.
Somebody had to help me. Somebody had, and it's not to say I didn't work hard, right?
Yeah.
But I had a baby when I was 15, right?
Right.
My mom made sure that I could continue my education,
Mm.
and I had a full scholarship to Howard. I was very blessed, and
Mm.
it was because I worked hard. But she kept my daughter for me while I went to school and allowed me to focus on that.
Mm.
Like, I wouldn't be where I am without that support, without her believing in me, and also me keeping my word. Right? I
Yeah.
went to school. I got 2 degrees, and I came back and got my daughter, and she was
Mm.
with me, ever since. And through medical school, like I said, I had already had a child. Me and my husband been together for 26 years. We haven't been married that long, but we've been together for 26 years. And so he was a pivotal part of me being able to finish medical school, because he would make sure, I had to find time to study. I waited tables all through medical school. So we, like, finding that balance of those things. I was very active in leadership and doing other things. And so, like, really making sure that we had those supports in place to help us with the kids is super important. It's super important. We had a great babysitter when I was in residency, Miss Armina. I know she's not gonna be watching this, but we would take him over some mornings. We had to take him at 6:30 in the morning,
Wow.
and she would watch him. She would bathe him. He come home smelling good every time, And then she would, we would pick him up in the afternoon, and she was like family. And I've been so blessed that so many people have treated me like that in my life, and I'm hoping it's because I put that good energy out. I really do believe you reap what you sow. And sometimes you go through hard things, and it's not that they're not gonna last forever. You sometimes you gotta let go and let God, and just be like, okay, I'm gonna put my faith in this because it's worked out every time.
Right.
Every time somebody stepped up,
Mm-hmm.
and it goes back to I really believe that we are the miracle for other people,
Yeah.
right? It's not this magical thing. Nothing like appears out of dust, but God puts it in our heart to help somebody else so that we can be that miracle for them.
Mm,
Because when it happens, it's because somebody cared enough to go into that space.
right.
And so we have to keep trying to be that miracle for somebody else because so many people have been that miracle for me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a great point that I think gets overlooked is the support on the personal side for the journey.
Hmm.
Just the journey to become a doctor, it's a lot, and it sounds like you've had
Yep.
even more difficult journeys along the way, and somehow, some way, you've been able to push through and made it through successfully. So congratulations on all that, because it sounds like it
Thank
wasn't
you.
easy. So I think that's probably, in terms of the work-life balance for doctors to think about, is going to be around that personal support side. And I do see
Hmm.
a lot of the physicians
Exactly.
waiting until much further down the line to kind of have a family and have kids, but some do kind of make it happen throughout the early stages. But you talked about medical school and residency. I'm just curious to know, like, if there's people going through medical school and residency and they're already eyeing starting their own private practice, what advice would you have for those?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I would tell you is to shadow someone, to push your residency program and medical school to put you in contact with people who are doing exactly what you want to do so you can see it, so you can be involved in it, so you can know what that process looks like. It would be ideal for them to offer some type of training during those different programs on how to start your own practice. When I was looking into residency programs, I knew I wanted to go in primary care. So trying to find one that speaks to that, right? Because I'm an internist, so I
Yeah.
only do adults. And I love internal medicine. Like I love what I do. But a lot of what we do now is more focused on us working in the hospitals or going into subspecialties.
Mm,
It wasn't as much focus on us going into primary care. So I really had to push in those different avenues to make sure that I had exposures and experiences in primary care that could that give me the knowledge and the resources to then know what I'm looking at down the line. Because the whole point of residency training is to prepare you under supervision for what you're going to do for the rest of your life, right? To
yeah.
give you the opportunity to practice with somebody kind of checking in so that when you get out, you have the confidence and the knowledge to do your best at what you have an expertise in.
Mm,
And so I think that that's the same thing that you have to do in private practice. Like you have to have someone with experience that's guiding you to get you to that other side,
yeah.
so and I think that's where we come in. Like if I've been there, and a lot of the course creation because people were reaching out to me to ask me to help them
Mm,
already.
right.
Like, you've done this, I see that your practice is growing. Like, how did you do it? What did you do?
Yeah.
How are you still open? How are you seeing so many patients? How are you staying busy? And so that's time consuming. So I really, some of it was selfish too, because I was like, how can I create something so that I can be like, okay, I package this in a way that I answer the questions that I see all the time, in addition to putting my own personal experience in it of what I had to go through. And the people who take my course will see it's actually I'm the person talking and in my usual voice, right? It's not like I tried to go through and give examples of what I experienced in addition to resources and
Hmm.
things like that and advice, because that's what people were coming to me with. So like packaging it into a place where it's palatable, where I
Mm,
also can take a step back and it be in a a format where I don't have to be intimately involved.
yeah.
Although I do, I have options for people if they want to talk more on a more one-on-one basis, but
Right.
really so that they can have what they need to move on to that next space,
Mm,
and be successful. So you have to and really pushing for that. If you're a resident or a medical student, pushing your programs to really give you those opportunities is key, because that's the whole point of this education. You're paying for that medical school education, and you're getting paid peanuts for that for that
right.
residency
Yeah.
spot. So it should really prepare you to be successful in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a perfect segue into, you have a masterclass coming up. Um, what would be some key takeaways if people are going to go attend there? And the target audience for this, because you're doing it with me, right? Is going to be people who are recent, maybe they just started private practice or they want to start a private
Hmm.
practice. So what would you say that they would expect to get from that masterclass?
Yeah. I think we're going to try to give you, without giving away all of our secrets, which we're going to try to give you a blueprint, try to give you some incentive and encouragement too, because we see it as scary and that it takes a lot of money, and I think we can dispel some of those myths within that, and also have people walk away feeling encouraged that this is something they can do, that they don't have to be a MBA from Harvard to develop a business plan and to come up with some ideas and to be able to pull in people who have that expertise into what they
Mm,
need to do to accomplish their goal. I think I won't say that it's ideal for people who haven't started yet, but part of what I've seen is those people who've already started, they have a different need,
mm,
right? They when you haven't started yet, we can mold you a little
yeah.
bit
Yeah.
and give you some stuff so that you don't have to go in and recreate the wheel, and that you also don't have to do it over again. Like we talked about earlier, get it right the first time so that you're not putting money on top of going and doing it again. I'll give you an example that's not in medicine. We had a contractor, we had a lot of stuff done in our house, and when they got finished the first time, we noticed that the tiles on the wall were crooked, like nothing was level. We had to pay a lot of money for somebody to come in and redo this beautiful bathroom that somebody had just done because they didn't know what they were doing from the
Mm.
beginning. Right? They said they were expert, but they didn't know what they were doing. So you could be an expert at medicine and not be an expert at
Yeah.
business. So let us come in this masterclass and give you the encouragement to use your resources to get it done right the first time, so that saves you some of that stress and heartache and money that you're going to spend, because that time you have to see it from the standpoint of time, your time being valuable and your time being worth it, and also value us for our expertise and that we've been there and have been doing this and have a track record where we've been able to be successful, and that we can help you to get to that point too.
Right.
And I think we also bring in the masterclass, I think you'll really see our character and our compassion that we have for people, and like how we share certain um, qualities and perspectives of life, of really being caring, like I said, and honest and forthright and that kind of thing, in what we do. And that we're giving you what you pay for. The free masterclass is just a invitation to what our world looks like and what we do in those spaces. So I think that we'll give people a worthwhile experience and at least a introduction to like what it is to start your own practice, what it is to really put the marketing and the brand behind you so that you can grow and be successful in a much shorter amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only thing I would add is, from my component, well, I'm going to be talking about the strong, pillars that of success that you really got to have in place when you're launching your practice, from the marketing and branding component, because it's overlooked a lot of the time. And ultimately, what happens
Hmm.
is down the road when it's overlooked is that physicians are trying to go back and fix something when it's already kind of too late. Sometimes it's
Hmm.
too late, or they have to pay at more because it's like, well, how do we undo what's been done? But yeah, so I mean, I think the masterclass is going to be a great, and it's free, right? But it's going to be a great place to learn and to get educated if you're thinking about starting your own private practice, or it's something you're interested in or you really want to do, or maybe you've already made that decision and you're already taking steps to go forward. Get people
Yeah.
on your team that can consult with you, whether it be like me or somebody like you, Dr. Kelly, who have gone through it, who know what to do, who know the blueprint to success. I mean, there's
Yeah.
no faster way to reach your goal, than that. So, what we'll do is we'll put the link to the landing page for the masterclass for people to sign up. We'll put it somewhere here on the video, and then we'll put it in the description where we share this video, so that way people can find it and sign up for that. And we look forward to seeing anybody who shows up there. Um, to end things out here, I wanted to ask you one final question around,
Sure.
you know, if you can go back in time and give yourself a piece of advice before you started your journey of private practice ownership, because now you're really successful. What would that advice be to your younger self? I guess you would say.
I would tell my younger self to focus sooner. To have really put my eggs in the basket. Like I think it's always good to have a plan B and have backups and that kind of thing. But I really would have told myself to focus sooner, because I think from a personal standpoint, I wasn't getting that work life balance at that point. We talked about my health and how that was strained by that process. Um, and the other thing I would tell myself is to take your breaks. You know, um, and in that same focus to focus on what is going to make you feel the most fulfilled. I say sometimes mind the business that pays me, like that. So I've been able to, because I think one of the things that I feel like is a downside for me is that I hear problems and I want to fix everything,
Mm,
right? And when I was younger, that's what I thought I could
yeah.
do. Um, and what I found is that if I focus on what I'm good at, I can change the world in this small space and feel successful, because you will always feel beat down if you try to change it in all of these other realms. So when it comes to starting a private practice, I feel like it's the same thing. Like, you're good at this, you're good at being a doctor. Let's focus on how we get that better,
Right.
and how we make that stronger, and how we pull in those people to support you, so that then you can enjoy the other aspects of life, because life is short.
Yeah.
We want to be able to do this and have a family and have friendships and just be a part of a positive world. And I think we can do it all. Like I said, I think you can have it all, just not at the same time. But if we're a village supporting each other and building that foundation first, like, you got a solid foundation, and as you build on it, you can expand out and do some different things. But really, I wish I would have focused a lot sooner.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've had a great conversation, and I've enjoyed it, talking to you about all of your insights and everything. And thank you for coming on to the podcast. And we look forward to talking more later.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye.